Today's episode is brought to you by elitefts.com. Founded in 1998 with the primary aim to live, learn, and pass on. Please help Elite FTS support this mission by smashing the like button, leaving a comment, sharing with a friend, and thinking of us for your training needs. If you can put it in a gym bag or load weights on it, Elite FTS has it.
What's going on? I'm Dave Tate. We are broadcasting from the middle of the Elite FTS weight room, where the underground still thrives and you're part of the crew. It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. Today's episode is brought to you by Element, a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything that you need and nothing that you don't. In other words, no sugar, no artificial coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, and no BS. With Element, I love the watermelon. The watermelon tastes freaking awesome. I drink one pack every day, no matter what. People that train out here, it's sitting out here for them all the time. The boxes don't last very long. Right now, Element is offering Table Talk listeners a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 single-serving packages free with any Element order. Get yours at drinkelement.com/Table Talk. The deal is only available through the link in the description. The other thing is, if you don't like it, you can just give it away to a salty friend and Element will give you a 100% refund. No risk, money back guarantee. Head over to drinkelement.com/Table Talk. America Health is a premium telehealth platform specializing in hormone optimization and preventative medicine. Are you looking to optimize your health in and out of the gym, improve recovery, sex drive, and quality of life? Have you tried speaking to your health professional about this and have gotten the cold shoulder, stereotyped, or just told it's part of getting older? You just go to americahealth.com/Table Talk, and you can create your own lab, or you can take labs that we've had set up for them, which are based upon the same labs that I've been doing over the last 15 years. Or you can use their guided optimization. With this, they'll put you in touch with a patient care coordinator, which is actually pretty cool because you get to sit down and speak to somebody that can understand what you're looking for from hormone optimization and the preventative medicine standpoint. After that conversation, they'll determine which labs that you should and which tests you should have done, and then from there, get the labs done. They'll review those labs with you and put you in touch with one of their hormone optimization specialists that can determine which supplementation that you should use over the counter or prescription. americahealth.com/Table Talk. The discount code is Table Talk. Today's episode is brought to you by First Detachment. Are you looking for a supplement brand that truly understands hardworking athletes? Look no further than First Detachment. 1D's real world experience is what I would consider, and they consider, battle tested. I have known Justin Harris for pretty close to 2 decades. And if there's anybody that I trust with nutritional and supplement needs, it's Justin Harris. If you guys have followed me and have followed the podcast, you pretty much already know how I feel about the supplement industry. For me to get behind any brand, I have to trust the brand and I have to trust the person both. And I'm pretty sure you guys all know why. When it comes to creating formulas and putting products on the market, and there's nobody that I trust more than Justin Harris. While I love all of their products, I'd suggest that you check out the Field Rations and WTH first. Go to www.firstdetachment.com and use the code TableTalk10 to save 10% off each order. The link is in the description. By Power Rack Strength CBD. Power Rack Strength was founded by Brian Carroll, good friend of mine. I've been thrown many products over the years, literally thrown many products over the years, which was all junk. So of course I was going to bust Brian a little bit when he first came out with this, until he explained to me how much research and who his partners were that were associated with his company. Then after he sent me some of the samples to test, I was absolutely blown away by the drops. As with most people, I have a hard time falling asleep. I'm cool when I'm asleep, but I have a hard time falling asleep. These were the only thing that actually helped me out of all the different things that I've tried in the past. It definitely makes a difference in my training. So check out PowerRackStrengthCBD.com. Use the code TableTalk2023 and you'll receive 35% off your first order. If I'm pushing anything, I'm pushing the drops first, then I will push the roller second. The balm is good, but I'm just not a balm guy. What's going on, guys? We are back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Brian Cushing. Just to read through this real quick, 9 years in the NFL with the Houston Texans, All-Pro, Pro Bowl, 7 times captain, Defensive Rookie of the Year, known for your work ethic, known for, starting up under Defranco. The reason I'm kind of like skipping through all this crap is I don't want to talk about the same stuff that you always talked about.
Sure.
But if you were to introduce yourself now, how would you introduce yourself? What would be the best introduction to be able to say who you are now?
Sure. Former NFL football player, linebacker, coach, but father of 3, husband, and really kind of that's my whole MO and where my time is mostly consumed now. Run a gym down in Houston as well. But very involved with youth sports and my boys, and that's kind of where, the focal point of my life has gone towards.
The one thing I skipped over here was you had 2 years working as an assistant strength coach with the Texans. So, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that plays in there because it's going to play into the conversation because I want to talk about, your training journey, over a period of time. I can't go into X and O's of football. That's, I played in high school.
Right.
That's kind of like where it ends. So I know enough with that. So if people are on here for like football stuff, there'll be football training stuff. There'll be some psychology, some mind stuff, but not going to be X and O type of stuff.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure that you're like pretty good, that you've had enough interviews.
Yes.
About
that. Absolutely.
That there's other things that go into it that I think are vitally important, where when I look at just weak points in general with the classic power lifts or just everything, life and everything, it doesn't matter what it is. I look at it in 3 different ways. It's either physical, mental, or technical.
Sure.
So no matter what the problem is, if it's your kid's baseball,
yeah,
right, he's screwing something up because it's either physical, mental, or technical. right.
Yes.
And the rare thing that I've seen, or the interesting thing that I've seen in life and in training especially, everybody wants to go to the physical first.
Right.
My bench sucks, so what do I need to do for my lockout?
Yeah.
There's technique and,
sure.
the same type of thing there.
Absolutely.
And they don't want to look at the other 2, which generally compromise where the problem's going to be.
Yes.
With your own training, you started working with Joe when you were a junior in high school.
Correct.
But you had to be doing some training before then.
Mm-hmm.
What was that?
Absolutely. Well, back to your original point too. I think the physical is first focused on because I think it's the quickest fix, right?
Yeah.
Where I think the whole mental part of all that takes a lot more work, right? And a lot more self-evaluating and probably exposing some things you don't want to see within your own self.
Mm-hmm.
So I think obviously, people kind of tend to fall back on physical first because they want the quickest fix, right? The easiest way to get back to the point of where they feel they can improve.
That's interesting because technical is repetition.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a longer fix.
Yeah.
Even when the other 2 as
yeah.
well.
Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, I started working with Joe when I was probably 15 or 16 years old.
What was the base before that?
Honestly, just kind of school lifting. Just some stuff that was. Joe really didn't start working with our football team until junior year. He had 2 other guys with him at the time that were helping out as well. They kind of oversaw our programming more freshman, sophomore year. To be honest with you, I don't think I touched a weight until my freshman year of high school. Mm-hmm. I was under the big old school impression, it would stunt my growth.
Yeah.
And I would get hurt. I would, wouldn't get any taller. So it was just, kind of backyard stuff. And I got a lot of, obviously, work capacity out of, all my plyos growing up, all my sports I was playing, football, basketball, baseball, agility, running, all that. And I had my brother helping me as well. I have a brother who's 13 years older than me. He played soccer, track, and baseball at my high school, then went on to college to play rugby.
Yeah.
So I had, some kind of training from him. It was more of just, running development. But true weightlifting and resistance training didn't really start until probably the end of my sophomore year. I had originally actually signed up at Parisi's.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to about a couple sessions there in Fair Lawn, New Jersey, and Joe had just started his own deal. So he had left Parisi's, but I had gone to Parisi's with the impression that he would still be there. So I signed up, went to a couple things there, and then eventually started working with Joe at high school, and then started doing private training in the Odyssey gym in basically a storage unit in the back corner.
Yeah, no, I
so that was when I was kind of introduced to true, strength conditioning and resistance training, and very, very eye-opening experience for me, especially when you start working out and you see the results directly correlate to your sport.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I was all in on that.
Well, if we keep going back, because you have younger kids now, where certain attributes like your visual acuity, explosive strength, that's all developed before you even got to that point.
Right.
So did that come from just being in sports as a kid all the time?
Yes, and I think multiple sports too.
Okay.
I think the best thing for an athlete is to play 2-3 sports, because I think certain sports kind of complement each other as well, right? And you've seen this whole motto of the one selective sport with kids now, and they're playing soccer or baseball from 5 years old, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously there's a certain outliers that are still going to make it just because they're so talented and get it. But I think the risk of burnout, from just doing one sport year round is a real thing.
Yeah.
And I think the multiple sports teach you different things as well. My middle boy was wrestling for a little bit, and I was a huge fan of it. More so because it was an individual sport.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it taught him to rely on himself, to trust himself, and give him that confidence, because you can be on a great team, not do anything, and win a championship. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You can't win a wrestling match and not be very good unless the guy's worse than you. But, at the same time, you have to have that self-confidence to rely on yourself, which then carries over to a team.
Mm-hmm.
So, I played every sport you can imagine growing up. And if I wasn't playing a sport, I was outside playing with my friends. Right?
Okay.
Or my older brother.
I think that plays into building that base, because, as you said, one sport can transfer or carry over to another one, where for you to get to that highest level, you have to have aerobic capacity, you have to have, strength capacity,
Yes.
You have to have all these different capacities that a lot of these are first, I don't want to say fully developed, and I don't even really want to say their ceiling is capped.
Right.
But it's a big difference if it's developed at the right time frame.
Yes.
So when it's only one sport, like what you're talking about, and that sport may not have aerobic endurance associated. So say no soccer, but just baseball.
Right.
Right. Well, then where's that aerobic endurance capacity being developed?
Yeah.
Elsewhere? And that's where when people hear multi-sport athlete, I don't think they see it the same way others see it.
Right.
Like I see it as the physical capacities being developed.
Sure.
Across broad spectrum, which can later, start to taper in.
Yes. And I just think you learn different things from different sports. Like I felt I was a better safety in high school because I played center field in baseball.
Okay.
I felt like my whole depth perception and my anticipation of seeing a ball off a bat and, getting to the right point helped me with the judging, covering a post route or, getting to the right depth in football. Like, I think they helped each other really well. I think playing receiver in football helped me hit better in baseball, right? Because that focus of locking in on a football, seeing it into your hands, getting to the right depth once again, helped me with my visualization and being able to see rotation on a baseball.
Yes.
Right. So I think those kind of complement each other really well. And I also think the physicality from football, as I'm seeing with my son right now, helped me with my, I guess you can call it physicality, more my mindset in baseball.
Yeah.
Right. My son just played his first tackle football season during fall baseball and had the best baseball season of his life.
Okay.
I mean, that's not saying a lot. He's 10 years old, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I had seen the competitiveness, aggression, and just overall confidence rise from football that carried over to baseball. So I feel like they all complement each other very well.
No, it's interesting because now you're able to see what's happening with him.
Yeah.
And then look back, on your own development.
Yes.
Where I think a lot of strength coaches and just parents in general that are trying to work with their kids or the strength coaches with their athletes, too many of them fall into the dogma that everything's solved in a weight room, which we were kind of talking about.
Yeah.
It is a piece.
Yeah.
But as we just spoke about, it's one piece.
Sure.
Of many.
Yes.
Because if you don't have that depth perception or the visual acuity, how are you going to do it with a face mask and a helmet on?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Because now those are obstructing your vision.
Sure. Yeah. It's complementary to the sport.
Yeah.
Right. It's not the primary thing, but it obviously helps. But like you're saying, so many things have to go right, for a player to reach his peak. Health, right? Staying healthy, getting stronger in the weight room, getting faster on the field is all great. Then you got to still make the plays on the field.
Yes.
Right. So there's so many contributing factors that go into an athlete reaching his peak performance.
Mm-hmm. So now with getting to the weight room with Joe in the storage closet, right? Because I think I actually sold him the rack that went in the storage closet. So I remember those times, and it wasn't very. I remember him telling me on the phone how big it was, and I'm like, huh?
Yeah.
And it was small. So it was a paradigm shift for you, right? Because you weren't used to doing that. You're just doing sport practice, right? And so when you started to notice that the strength development was carrying over to your sports at the time,
yes,
plural, that just fed into it, I assume.
Absolutely. It was, it was just one of those deals. We'd go there. Eventually started probably training 1 to 2 times per week, and then just as you continue to see the improvement and progression, and then next thing you know, you're training 5 times a week because you just want to continue to keep getting better. Getting faster, getting stronger. But I think the most important thing from the original storage unit was the mindset, right? The mindset of going in there with blue collar attitude, attacking workouts. We'd work out, and one of our rival high schools were working out either before or after us, and it was like, what'd they do? Okay, let's do more. Mm-hmm. Let's do more. Because Joe started getting that name as the trainer, the best trainer around. Everybody wanted to go see him. So, it was just a super competitive attitude towards training and weightlifting that clearly carried over to the field. And like I said, we'd hear about, the guys before us, they were holding the fat grip bar for 1 minute and 40 seconds. Well, we're hitting 2 minutes. Yeah. All 3 of us, right? And if we don't, we're going to keep doing it until we do. Mm-hmm. It was just a super competitive environment that really, kind of propelled my career tremendously.
With that time period, Joe was doing some strongman. Did the strongman days come in that early, or did it come in a little later?
No, yeah, it was there.
So it was there.
It was there. Yeah.
All right. So he voice texted me, a story that he wanted me to ask you about,
sure,
which was one of these strongman days. You guys are out on the field or wherever it was, and he's got pro guys on one side of the field. Yeah. And then your guys are you're on the other side of the field, and one of the pro guys is running their mouth.
Yes.
So what proceeded to happen after that?
So, like I said, I had a brother that was 13 years older than me.
And how old were you at the time?
I was probably 17. Mm-hmm. So this guy was a linebacker in the NFL. And, my brother, I was around his friends a bunch growing up, right? And I just got the shit beat out of me a lot of times. And my brother at 16 years old would take me to his flag football games against 29, 30, 30-year-old plus guys, right? And they treated me like one of them, which helped me grow up a lot faster, right? It made me just a lot tougher and was not, I almost felt comfortable in more chaotic environments, right? So anyway, we're doing a strongman, and I'm in high school, we're training, and there's an NFL group out there, and we're lifting, and this guy's just talking shit to all of us. So I eventually, kind of voiced something, told him to shut up, all that, and he comes back and says, "What'd you say?" And I told him, get the fuck out of here, basically. It was one of those deals where you're bullying a bunch of 16, 17-year-old guys. You're in the
How
NFL.
long has he been in the NFL at the time?
Probably about 6-7 years.
Okay.
So he was a well-established guy, and I think once I kind of got in his face and said it to him a little bit, he was shocked, and I think it just, kind of took a step back and, gained his respect a little bit. Didn't think, a 17-year-old kid would kind of say something to him like that. But I saw myself as eventually being where he was, right? And I felt like he was just there because he was older. So there was I had respect, but there was no superiority in my eyes, right? And, me being kind of the leader of our group wasn't going to let him talk to our guys like that. Yeah. And, it was our high school field. He didn't go there. He was just training there because Joe was his trainer and they were working out there that day. So, my friends were looking at me like, what the fuck are you doing? You gotta beat your ass. In my mind, I didn't think he would though. Yeah. Right. That confidence came from the training we did, the grueling sessions and going through it. And feeling like, I will eventually be a professional football player. So, just, a little heated moment, in high school. Gained a lot of respect from him and my friends there too as well. Yeah. But like I said, I was used to older guys talking a lot of shit to me. So it was kind of one of those moments where I actually became more comfortable instead of, kind of backing up and getting a little scared.
At what point in high school did you assume this leadership role or start to, because not everybody, but most football players dream of being in the NFL. Your story seems a little bit different. Like there was a dream for a little bit, but then there was just certainty that this is going to happen. Yeah. When did that click and why do you think that clicked?
I think it was I started my sophomore year about halfway through. I was kind of an unknown, at my high school. Freshman didn't play on varsity. So I came up sophomore year and was kind of not really a big name or anything. But I was on the scout team and just against our starting offense and just laying guys out, picking the ball off, pissing our offense completely off. Our head coach hated me, right? But I got to a point where I was so sick and tired of not playing that I was going to do something about it in practice and make them play me, and eventually it started, okay, you're on kickoff. Okay, you're going to get a couple reps on defense. Okay, this guy's got to start, right? So sophomore year, I had a pretty good year. We lost in the state championship, but from my sophomore to junior year is when I the whole transition happened. And, from my first game junior year till my last game my senior year, it was pretty dominant. Pretty dominant all the way around.
What do you mean by transition?
So I had started both ways then going into my junior year, but just more mentally than anything else. I had also went from probably my sophomore year 5'11" to junior year. I was then about 6'3". Okay. So I had a huge growth spurt, put on about 20 pounds, and was kind of starting to look the part of a prospect, right? A guy that could definitely play football in college. The attention then started going from, Princeton, UPenn, schools, closer to home, to Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, eventually USC. So once those schools started talking to me, I was, kind of realized where I was and, had a real good chance of, playing in college. But once you start getting those, those offers, that's unbelievable. What's the next step after that?
Well, what's that like in that position too? Because there's got to be a stress associated with that too. Because if you go out and have a bad game, sure, that's got to mess with your head too.
Sure, absolutely. but it was just it was expected, you know. It was I don't know if it was a stress, just because I felt like I belonged. I didn't feel like I could have a bad game. I might have a couple bad plays, but I always knew I could make up for it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think just playing 100% all out kind of takes care of a lot of those problems.
So where's that come from?
Probably my family. You know, my dad was brutal on me growing up, and I had a brother who was a lot older than me, reiterating everything he said. So it was like two dads, you know, kind of coming down on me all the time. It was a family of, when you weren't doing well, you heard about it all the time, and when you were doing great, there wasn't much said.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was because I was the third. I was just kind of treated a little bit differently. My dad had gone through two previous kids, you know, raising them, seeing their sports, and felt like, you know, he had a pretty good grasp on the whole, you know, fatherhood thing. But the work ethic and the performance was kind of just ingrained in me from a very young age. My dad had played college baseball, played in 2 college World Series. He was in the Army. I mean, the guy was up at the same exact time every day, went to bed at the same exact time every night. And every morning I could smell shoe polish, right? Because he was so used to polishing his boots in the Army. He was still doing it in the morning when he was home. So it was very a regimented schedule that, you know, I never saw the guy sick, stay home from work, just an extremely hard work ethic. My mom was born into a work camp in Germany right after World War II. So she immigrated here when she was, I think, 8 or 9, rode a boat right to Ellis Island, came in after World War II, grew up just, I mean, dirt poor in Jersey City, Bayonne, New Jersey. Very hard, you know, lifestyle growing up, extremely tough work ethic. So I didn't have anyone really to complain to when things weren't going well, right?
Yeah.
No one felt bad for me, because I had better than both of them, no doubt, growing up. So, you know, the whole compassion and sympathy was lacking pretty bad in my house, which kind of, you know, mentally calloused me a little bit, you know, got me tougher. For me, it was, you know, once I found my niche of football, that was my thing, you know, and I was just going at it 100 miles per hour.
Well, there's pros and cons with that, right? So the structure is probably the biggest pro to come out of that. Now you're on the other end, though. You're the father.
Sure.
You know, so you see the pros of that, but you also see the cons of that.
Yeah.
So what have you changed, or are you trying to change?
Trying to change,
because a lot of it's just going to come out because it just does.
Yeah.
I'm a father as well. If you say something, you're like, what the fuck did I just say?
Yes.
So what are those things that, because you still want to give your kids those same positive attributes, but not have the same negative adversity.
Absolutely.
Because they need their own new adversity.
Yes.
So how do you try to balance?
Yeah. It like you said, trying it definitely, right? I just remember growing up and always eventually seeing myself as a father, right? So I'd see and hear what my dad would say and think, okay, that was great. I didn't like that. I'm not going to do that when I'm a dad, but I'm going to continue to, you know, say this message. And it's amazing how many times things come out of me, right? And it just comes out, and I just think, oh my God, dude, I sound exactly like my dad, right? Or I sound exactly like that's what my mom would say or how she would act about it. So I think my wife does a really good job of bringing more compassion and empathy into the house than I had growing up. You know, and people like, now I'm coaching football, I'm coaching baseball, I'm helping on baseball. People really like my coaching style and ask all the time, hey man, can you coach, you know, my kids how you're talking to your kids? And I just tell them I can't, because your kids aren't going home and having the conversations with me that I'm having with my kids at night.
Yes,
right.
Point.
So there's a lot of not making up, but explanation of, you know, why I get so frustrated in a certain situation. And, you know, we can kind of talk it over, and I'm trying to be a lot more receptive with their message back of like, hey, Dad, I get it, but maybe don't say that in that moment, or don't, I got it. So I'm trying to hear them too and work on myself, because I didn't have that growing up, right? It was, this is the message. Don't care how you feel. Figure it out.
Yeah.
Where now it's kind of, I'm trying to have more of a bond. And I'm very close to my parents, especially my dad. My dad is, my best friend on earth. But I'm just trying to have a more compassionate relationship with my kids. Hard coaching for sure. Hard teaching. Because there's a certain level of expectation. But they're doing a really good job. At the same time, I am trying to be a lot more open-minded as a parent.
Well, being around as an athlete and a coach for all these periods of time, would you say you have to have both? You have to have the hard coaching, but then it needs to be balanced with the compassion after talk.
Yeah,
yeah. All of one and not the other is going to.
No, yeah, absolutely. And this is interesting, but I was listening to my good friend the other day, who's now the head coach of the Houston Texans, in this press conference. They were asking about his staff and what kind of staff he was going to bring in. He said a very diverse staff, from old to young, all different race, ethnicity and religion doesn't matter, because I think you need to have a diverse staff because every kid learns differently. And you need a good cop, bad cop. And, sometimes one person could be both. So, just hearing him say that kind of opened my mind. It reminded me a lot of my two older boys. 2 years apart, share the same room, same parents, grew up the exact same way, very different personalities. And they need to be coached and taught differently, So I think through trial and error and understanding who they are better, you just, you kind of have to talk to them differently. One needs more compassion than the other. One needs more hard coaching than the other. One does really well with, compliments and praise, where the other kind of needs to hear, some of that, not negative, but hard coaching kind of talk. So I definitely think you need both, though, because, at the end of the day, they need to be reminded they're loved, right? They are respected, and they will be taken care of. So, obviously the discipline and hard work is super necessary, but like you said, the other side of it is as well.
With going back to the high school football years, more to the junior, senior year, so the last 18 months or whatever it is, you're training at Joe's and you're doing that, but that's not everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
Like what? Because that's easy to find. You can just look up Joe's blogs and see what you were doing training back then. But what else were you doing on top of that?
Yeah.
Just knowing your personality. You can't sit here and tell me you weren't out sprinting, working drills, and doing things like that. So
absolutely.
What did that look like?
There was a lot of extra work on top of it, but mostly a lot of watching others too. Like I was always watching college football, NFL football. YouTube and the internet weren't as big back then, but anything you could find, I was watching it, and seeing how these guys were training, how these guys were studying, how these guys were learning, was something I always tried to implement into my own game. I was a huge University of Miami football fan growing up, so I watched Sean Taylor, Jonathan Vilma, DJ Williams, all those guys. I would see in the off season how they would train, how they would sprint, and how they would get after it. Days I wasn't working out, I was probably going to a track. I was going to a track, and I wasn't running long distance or anything, but I was just working on sprinting, my linear speed. Then I'd go onto the field, I'd work agility, I'd work cutting, I'd work plyos. Some of it might have been counterproductive just because of how much I was training, but I felt like I was always getting something out of it. I wasn't as educated, at the time of, exactly what, a program should look like. Joe gave me what I had to do, but there was always more on top of it as well. And it was probably geared towards what sport I was playing and what time of the year it was. Obviously, just, like Ohio and New Jersey is pretty tough to get outside in the winter. So that's kind of where we, hunkered down at home, and we were finding a gym or going into my garage and getting after it. So very active lifestyle, with, you know, the entire intent and mindset to eventually make it.
I think that's important to point out because I think those attributes get lost in the story, right? Because they'll see, hey, this is like, how did he train? Then they're going to go look and they're going to read everything that Joe put out there.
Yeah.
And then maybe that's 4 or 5 times per week for an hour.
Yeah.
So 5 hours per week, that may be only 5 out of 20 total hours.
Yeah. It's not a lot of time.
Of the extra stuff that
Sure.
you're doing, not counting practice when practice was going on.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so there's that time as well.
Yeah.
Where I don't want to leave that misunderstanding for kids that are aspiring to become better.
Yeah.
To think that, because I do think this does happen, and maybe it happens in your facility a little bit, where parents will send their kids there and think that this 3 hours per week is going to be enough.
I know.
To build their skill. Forget about the training and strength, but their skills.
Yes.
It's not going to be enough.
It's not. You know, speaking of that story, it just reminds me of about 2 years ago. We were on a baseball team, practiced on practiced on Thursday. And we were at a facility. And then Sunday morning in a group message, a parent had wrote that, hey, you know, my son has lost his glove. And I know we're playing today. Can you guys check if anyone else had picked it up? And the first thing that came to my mind was Thursday night, Friday, Saturday. He's just looking for his bag Sunday, which means he did no work in between that Thursday and Sunday, which was mind-blowing to me because I remember being 8, 9 years old. And whatever sport I was playing was an obsession, right? Where if it's Thursday night, I might go to bed, but Friday, you know, one of the first things I'm going to do is if I'm inside, I'm throwing a ball against the wall and using my glove over and over. You know, Saturday, I'm having a catch. I'm throwing, you know, pretty hard, getting ready for my game. Sunday, I clearly know I have my glove because I just practiced 2 days with it in between that time. So, yes, right, parents are going to drop their kids at places and expect you, you know, to be the magician, turn them into a pro athlete with no work in between. I would say the majority and most important part is what you do on your own.
Oh, I believe that 100%.
You know, because that's what's going to build you and your character as far as an athlete. I read something the other day. It was a good point. Was saying that the most important coach for your kid is himself, because he is going to be the one that decides his work ethic, how hard he wants to get after it, you know, his obsession, how far he wants to take it. You can give him everything you can, but you can't give him that. You know, he has to have that internal drive of, you know, the extra hours of training and is this really what I want to do? Now there's some outliers that are so physically talented it doesn't matter, but that's super rare, right?
Yeah.
Because I've played with some guys that are really just freaks, but do they really love it? I don't know. But do they have to do it because they're so good at it and it pays a lot? Yeah, probably. But, you know, for the other 99.7% of people, there's going to be a lot of extra work that's required, and it's going to be up to them.
Well, it's an interesting rabbit hole, right? Because it's when it has to come from within, right? I can remember when I was junior high, I was wrestling. You know, I had this thing in my head. I would never go to sleep unless I actually earned it. So I had to be so fucking tired that I would pass out every single day from wrestling, drop steps, practice, or whatever it was associated with that. And I don't know where that came from, you know. And so with our own kids, you're trying to like teach that.
Yeah.
But how do you? That's the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Like what the hell? Like what is that? Because if you see it, you definitely want to, you know, compliment it and, you know, build upon it.
Sure.
But you're like waiting, like, oh, where is it?
Yeah.
You know,
I know.
Think you see it.
Yes. There's glimpses, right?
Yeah.
A lot of it, you know, you're just, you know, waiting for maybe a little bit more maturity. But I think the biggest teacher is a parent doing it themselves. I think work ethic is taught through example.
Yeah.
Right. I think I saw it in my dad and his insane regimen that never broke and was at work 5-6 days a week, and that never ever fluctuated, right? Like there was no other choice or option in his mind. And no matter how tired or what the day looked like, he was either coming to my game in a shirt and tie, or if I didn't have a game that day, first thing he's doing is he's changing into some clothes and we're going outside and working. Right. So he showed it to me through example. So I think that's the biggest thing. The biggest way you can teach it is just by doing it yourself. And I think a lot of kids will learn a lot better that way, because it's one thing to say it and never do it. Right. It's one thing to say it and like, this is how I did it and da-da-da-da, but you're not really doing anything to prove it. And it's another thing to, be the first guy to, get them out there and get to work and show them, this is what the requirements are to get to where you want to go.
I think another piece that would play into it is adversity, overcoming it.
Yeah.
Because it's, in a lot of cases, it's one of those situations where you think to yourself, this is never happening again, ever. Right. And so you're going to make damn sure it never does.
Yeah.
Or you just through those little, when you're younger, the little battles, which don't seem like much to an adult looking back.
Yeah.
But to a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old kid, it's that one little thing that they overcome. They're like, you know what, I did that.
Absolutely.
And then it can build.
Absolutely.
On that, where those two worlds combined.
Yeah.
By looking and having somebody to show it to you.
Yeah.
Parent, coach, shit, it can be a friend. It can be a lot of different people.
Yeah.
You could show that path, and then internally, at least with my kids, and putting them in situations where they have to overcome little things.
Yeah.
Right. Because if it's too easy, I don't know if they get that.
Yeah. No, I agree. And like you're saying, we've been through a million battles that we've overcome, and, look back, you're like, that wasn't that big of a deal. But for, an 8, 9, 10-year-old, it is a massive deal, right? Because they're not as battle tested.
Yes.
So, some things can seem like the end of the world to them. I go through it with my 10-year-old all the time. But I just try to remind him, once he does get through it, was it that bad? Think about how much you dreaded doing that. And not only did you get through it, but you kicked its ass, right? So just remember those things. The things that seem impossible really aren't. And you're going to do a lot better job than you think you are if, you do it the right way, and you grind and put your head down.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of that just comes from experience.
It does. And it's hard. I mean, that's like, you can't sit down with a kid and have this conversation, right?
No.
Where I can sit down with you and say, okay, what I've learned over the years is, and no matter how bad the situation is, no matter what it is, it's never as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it's also never as good as what I thought either.
Yeah.
So even the great stuff, it's like, it still wasn't as great as I thought it was.
Yeah.
But it's somewhere in here. You can't explain that.
No, you can't. You can't, just, to kind of lower your expectations, as far as the highs and lows, and kind of trying to stay even keel with, a level mindset is almost impossible to get through, with a kid until they experience it themselves.
Well, it's not just a kid, though. It can also be your teammates as well, right? So when you were in high school, I'm how many state championships was it? 2, right? So you had a team of pretty much everybody having the same objective.
Yeah.
With that, when you go to decide where you want to play in college with multiple offers, what did that decision process look like?
Yeah.
Because you can't go any further away than you did.
I guess I could have went to Hawaii, but
you could have.
Yeah. So that might be the only one. No, it was a very interesting process. My dad, born and raised in New Jersey, Irish Catholic, and he wanted me to go to either Boston College or Notre Dame or Ivy League. He was just infatuated with, a great education and staying relatively close to home. He had this obsession. He'd always say, wherever you go, I just don't want you going west of the Mississippi. And I'm like, what? Like, what is, like, the Oregon Trail or something? What does that even mean? So he was just old school, and I think he wanted me close to home and going to a school that he knew was a good school. I think anything further out than that, he didn't know enough about. So I took my visits, Penn State, Notre Dame, Michigan, Rutgers. I visited all these places kind of relatively close to home. And then I saw USC play Michigan in the Rose Bowl. And I saw Pete Carroll just running up and down the sideline looking like he was having a blast. The kids were going nuts, and I was like, damn, that looks like a real fun environment. Like, that looks like a really cool place to play. Sure enough, they started recruiting me, and I was like, oh, man, this is where I want to go. And my dad's like, where? He's like, California? Absolutely not, like, nah, So anyway, long story short, I finally visited there, and I played in the high school All-American game in San Antonio, and my dad was in charge of the travel. So he sent us to Dallas, I think to Vegas, and then to California, just to make the trip as miserable as possible. Like, he was doing everything he could for me not to go there. And he didn't go. My mom went. My mom and I. So then we ended up landing in California in Los Angeles, and the running backs coach, who was my recruiter, a guy named Todd McNair, who grew up in Camden, went to Temple, played in the NFL, picked me up, took us out to lunch on the beach, do the whole deal, recruiting visit. I'm like, I have to go here. Like, it just felt right. I just felt like if I went anywhere else, I'd always be asking what it would have been like if I went to USC. So, long story short, came home. I tell my dad. My mom was more in love with it than I was, right? And he's just pissed at her. Like, what are you doing? Like, this is not what you're supposed to be telling him. You're supposed to be telling him you don't want to go there. So, he gets pissed at her, and I just tell him, I'm like, eventually, Dad, I just feel like I have to go here. The USD staff came to the house a couple times. He really liked them. But once again, it was just really far for him to kind of, coordinate and make it work. Anyways, he goes, all right, you can go there. That's fine. He goes, because I'm not going to be the one, hitting the alarm at 5:30 in the morning, having to go do morning runs and stuff. Like, this is on you. Mm-hmm. You have to go where you want to go. But at the same time, you better not call me and tell me you want to transfer. You're going to stick it out and ride it out there for 4 or 5 years, whatever it takes, and you're going to get it done out there. I was like, well, okay. Certain things can go wrong along the way, and I might have to. But I was like, all right, I got it. So, I ended up signing out there. And freshman year was tough. I mean, I was 3,000 miles from home. I didn't know how to do laundry. I didn't know how to change my bed sheets, nothing. Mm-hmm. But the good thing is it made me grow up faster. It made me start to rely on myself for food, getting to school, figuring out rides. Everything was up to me. So it was a really good experience. But freshman year was hard. I was homesick. I called my dad a couple times. He said, don't say it. Don't say it. You better figure it out. Don't say it. All right, I got it. Sophomore year got a little bit better. Junior year was I got hurt, but I came back, and I eventually ended up meeting my then-to-be wife. So senior year was great. Got drafted. People ask me all the time, like, how was that? That was, it must have been hard going all the way, across the country like that. And it was. There's no doubt it was, but I think it'd be hard if you go 45 minutes from home. College is just a different experience all on its own. There's a lot of freedom, a lot of free will to make a lot of choices that you wouldn't be able to make if you're living at home. You find a lot out about yourself, your personality, what drives you, motivates you. So now it was an unbelievable experience.
Well, as a player too, your schedule is ridiculously scheduled.
Yes.
So I don't think that matters where you were to play. It's still Groundhog Day.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's the same thing a lot over and over, and a lot of redundant, repetitive stuff. But I always did well with that. With this is my first thing in the morning, this is my last thing at night, and I got a lot of things in between, and it's already laid out for me. Like that, I function a lot better that way. So I kind of thrived in that process. And it was difficult, but I always liked knowing exactly what I was doing that day. And, college football was perfect for that.
Now with this weight room component, at that point you have 4, maybe 5 years? No. 3 or 4 years training with Joe, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're going out into a vastly different strength and conditioning program.
Yes.
So you're going from a warehouse to, I don't think people understand what some of these weight rooms look like. You know, an immaculate training facility with everything that you would need.
Right.
And So then you start that training process. Where was your mind with all that? Because it probably wasn't what you were currently doing.
No, it wasn't.
Or before.
It wasn't, and a lot of the training and lifts were different. I was running a lot more. I was doing a lot more Olympic lifting. But it was just whatever was thrown at me. I just looked at it as a challenge. I wanted to be the fastest linebacker. I wanted to be the strongest linebacker. I wanted to make an impact right away. But I just remember going out to SC and one of the first things was like, these linemen are as fast as my wide receivers in high school. Everybody was extremely talented. Mm-hmm. So what was going to separate me from the rest of the guys? And I think it was just absolute obsessive work ethic that directly translated onto the field. It was eventually I became the prick. Mm-hmm. It was like, what's your deal, man? Like, why are you so serious, and why are you hitting everyone like that? Why are you playing like that? It was a large part of it was because I was from New Jersey and I was going out to California. And it was totally different,
mm-hmm.
cultural deal. So, it took people a little bit of time to understand me, and vice versa. It took me a lot of time to understand, people from California and why they're so laid back and why isn't everybody in such a rush doing everything,
mm-hmm.
right? So that was very different. But eventually it just became accepted. It became accepted, and then it became the new standard, right? So the way I played became accepted, and then it was the standard of how everybody should play on defense. So that's how I made my impact, was kicking ass in practice, never missing practice, going as hard as I could, taking it as serious as a game. And, then eventually the head coach starts acknowledging you and starts talking to you in front of the whole team about showing highlights of this guy. And this is how everyone should play. And you kind of, you hear that, and it just, it's the biggest compliment you can get, and then eventually you start, thriving in that and want to continue to be that guy and uphold that standard. So it was a very interesting experience, going in from a freshman and just trying to find out who you are, and how you're going to impact the team. They were just coming off a national championship. There was a ton of talent. There was a ton of NFL players in that room, a ton of eventual NFL coaches. So figuring out how you were going to, make your name and stick out was the hardest thing, but, something that I was ready for.
Yeah. Well, something that you said was trying to figure out what corresponded to the field, right? And I think that's a mark of your entire career.
Yeah.
From high school on, was figuring out what things were going to have transference.
Yes.
To the field, and with the weight room did for you.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of caveats, which we'll talk about, but
yeah.
It did for you. And then going to USC, it's a whole different type of program, and mm-hmm. instead of fighting against it, you leaned into it.
Yes.
Which a lot of times that's not going to be the case.
Yeah.
Because, your strength probably on classic lifts might have been better than a lot of the people that were there.
Right.
So you can have that attitude of, this shit's bullshit because I'm already stronger than everybody else.
Right.
Or lean into it to see if there's a way that it can help you
mm-hmm.
become better.
Yes.
So granted, I don't know how much choice you have, when you're when you're in that environment that you're in, but I do see the kids that fight against it.
Yeah. Yeah, it never works out well. I was just always under the impression, especially as a younger player, coming to a new team or a new environment, you just shut up, you got in line and you followed what everybody was doing, mm-hmm. right? And then once you start kicking ass and making a name for yourself, that's when you can kind of negotiate a little bit. But before that, go all in, and then that was one of the biggest signs above our door in the weight room and onto the practice field and onto the Coliseum, was all in, and you tapped it every time mm-hmm. you went onto the field. And I thought that was really cool, because I just loved the team aspect, and I didn't want to be the guy that went the other way, because I'd seen it enough, mm-hmm. and it never works out.
Yeah,
it really doesn't. So you check your ego. Everybody's good that's coming there. Everybody was the best high school player and maybe in the state, wherever they played, right? So what's going to separate you is one, I think, starts with, being a good teammate, right? Because it's the guys that, don't want to work out, don't want to go to class, think that, the way they did it before is going to work here, even though we do things a different way. It never really pans out well for them. And I'd seen it quick enough in my freshman year, guys that were 5-star recruits that were sophomores or juniors, and it was like they're going the other way fast, right? And any chance they have to complain about the strength coach or the head coach or the position coach, they're doing it in the locker room, and it's like it's an energy vampire. Like you don't want to be associated with it or near it, and before you know it, they're at a different school.
I was going to say, how do you, if you're coming in and you're, captain, I assume, of their high school team, and you see this, and this crap does not work.
Yeah.
And you just got there, you can't say anything about it.
Right.
You got to earn the right to be able to say something
Sure.
about it.
Yeah.
So how did that play out in your head?
Yeah.
Because you have to avoid, you don't want to get sucked into it.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
you have to avoid it.
Yeah. Well, you see all of it, right?
Yeah.
You definitely acknowledge it. You don't vocalize it yet.
Yeah.
But you definitely see it, and you think, I don't want to be like that guy, right? I visualize myself going in a different, better direction. But you've also, as a freshman in college, I had seen it also as a freshman in high school. So it wasn't my first experience seeing it. I'd been through it before and seeing that transition before, and then I had to go through it again as a rookie in the NFL. So it's like, it's this crazy transition of being, a freshman to, working your way up to being the man, back to being a freshman again,
Yeah.
right? So it's like this constant wave of ranking and who you are. But, I think as long as you're able to kind of check your ego and do what's the best for the team and be the best teammate as possible, stay open-minded as well, all right? Because I had been with 6 different strength coaches that had 6 very different approaches. Some guys, and I think you can learn something from all of them, right? Not saying that one program is clearly the best and anything else that's said is, bullshit. It's not gonna work, and it's not gonna help you. So I think just staying open-minded and kind of giving people a chance was the best approach that I had as far as that kind of wave of superiority and ranking.
Yeah.
So
Well, with the strength and conditioning side, you're different than most because you were trying to figure it out on your own too.
sure,
Like what works for you, which that's not the majority of
no,
college players. I mean, they're just doing it because that's what they're expected to do.
yeah,
Then they get the NFL, then they just don't.
yeah,
Where you wanted to figure it all out, first off, why?
Right.
Was it just something that intrigued you, or was it something that you knew you had to do because it would make you better?
I think it definitely intrigued me, and I knew it would make me better. But I remember, just absolutely loving the weight room, and just always loving to go in and work out, and just knowing it was making me better. But at the same time, it became to a point where I almost enjoyed the weight room more than practice.
That's what I was going to say. Balance.
Like, and that's not common, and I understand that, but I think it comes from being, so fortunate to have Joe Defranco training me as a sophomore, junior in high school. So I had known what good training had looked like, and it got to a point where it was, we'd be in the weight room on Fridays. We're done for the week, and it's myself, Taylor Mays, Clay Matthews, and our workout was at noon on a Friday. So in the off season, so our work is done for the week. Our school's done for the week. We come in at noon, and we're leaving at 5:30, 6 o'clock, because the strength coach is saying, "Hey, I'm going home. You guys need to get out." Or who knows how late we would have stayed, right? So finding guys like that are like-minded, obviously, helps with the training, the mindset, and everything. But it was just one of those deals that eventually fell in love with the weight room because I knew it was making me, honestly, a better football player, but more importantly, a better person overall. And I truly believe that.
So in some regard, it's your ability to manipulate the variables is somewhat capped when you're in college. Then when you get drafted and then you're in pros, that cap is somewhat removed.
Yes.
So now you have the ability to explore really whatever you want, from recovery modalities to different training principles and all. So it's, I guess, from the football meathead perspective, it's like, this is a dream come true.
Sure.
You know, so when that flips and that changes, what are some of the first things? Because now you got 6 years, right?
Yeah.
Of thinking, man, if I had the ability to do this just on my own, I wouldn't do this, I would do this.
Yeah.
Now you can.
Yeah.
So what were some of the first things that you did?
Well, I remember my agent laughing because, you know, before the draft, they offered to pay for pretty much whatever, you know, and, you know, he had some guys before me that had some pretty wild demands on, you know, what they wanted. And I remember we just played in the Rose Bowl, and I was officially done with college, my last game. We go to the hotel, and he goes, okay, is there anything that you need? And I said, yeah, I need you to pay for my training in New Jersey, and I want a hyperbaric chamber. And he was like, that's what you want? Like, no car or anything? I'm like, no. Like, that, you know, I'm going back home to train with. I'm going to live in my parents' house. You don't have to worry about paying for anything, rent or anything. Just pay for my training, and I want a hyperbaric chamber. He's like, you might make it. You know, you got the right mindset. You know, most guys are, you know, asking for the, you know, extravagant cars and all the other stuff that comes with it. But it was, like you're saying, it was a dream come true. I was going to get drafted to play football, and I had the ability to kind of train however I wanted and recover however I wanted, and had, you know, the resources to finally be able to do it. I remember being in college, and I heard the story about when Terrell Owens broke his leg and slept in a hyperbaric chamber a week before the Super Bowl and was able to play. I was like, I need that. Something that can get me back on the field faster and make me feel better. Like, that's where my whole focus was at. And my whole mindset was just football, how to get better at football, and how to stay healthy. So, I mean, that was very interesting for my agent to hear that, and kind of shocked him. I think he was relieved at the same time.
So your first years in the league, was the training based more along becoming stronger, and then towards the end of your career, the longevity, or was it always the longevity from the start?
Well, I wanted to play as long as possible.
Yeah.
There was no doubt about that. I wanted to play as long as possible, but you know, for me, it was just always really hard for me to change my mindset of getting as strong as absolutely possible, because I just felt like it would keep me healthy, and two, it would make me a better player.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, if I look back at my training, it was a little ridiculous at some of the stuff I was trying to accomplish.
Such as?
Year 7, 8, 9, max squatting the day after a game, you know, the amount of volume on certain lifts I would try to accomplish on a Thursday or a Friday and be playing football in 2 days. But it was just the attack that I kind of brought into that room. It was every time I went in there, I was trying to get better, right? Where I think if I look back, I could have shifted some of that, the ideas and mentality towards, all right, let's just work on, you know, maybe a little bit mobility today, or, you know, and I did that on top of, right, but maybe it could have been instead of, you know, say a massive lift for the day. So it was, you know, any chance I had, as soon as off season broke, I was on the next flight back to New Jersey, you know, training hard in January. Was it necessary? I'm not sure. But mentally, it made me feel a lot more comfortable, right? Because I felt like if I was not training, I was getting worse. So, you know, now sitting back that, you know, my playing days are over, there are some things I think I could have tweaked or adjusted, but I'm just glad the mindset really is what helped me and gave me the chance to play as long as I did.
Well, that plays into it, but when you say I'm not sure, like if going back training super hard, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I wondered, you know, my last 2 years playing, I definitely was, you know, a step, if not two, slower.
Yeah.
You know, was that injury related? Was that age related? I'm not sure. Was that training related? Maybe. You know, I think a guy's peak is only a certain amount of time. And, you know, I'm not sure if I extended or shortened it with basically how hard I trained, or how hard I trained is also how hard I played, right? So I think some of the nicks and bruises and smaller injuries probably could have been avoided, right? But it's tough for me to say that because I wouldn't have wanted the film to change then, because then I think the game film would have changed if I played a little bit slower or hesitant or safer, right? So I'm not sure if I would have traded it, but like we talked earlier, could it have gave me 3 more years? Maybe. Or could it have not made me be the same guy I was? Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So it's this constant balance of, the hindsight and being 2020. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it could have changed a lot of things, but, I was, like I said, I went to the weight room with one goal every day, and was whatever I had for that day. If I was not as strong as the previous week or last time I did that exact lift, I was going to find a way to get back there eventually because it was going to drive me crazy.
I mean, one of the 2 words that I got away from powerlifting, and then when I came back into powerlifting, there was 2 words that just stuck with me when I came back, and that was, I'm not going to ask what if, no matter what. It's just not going to happen. And so I can look at the situation that you're talking about, and you can look back and say, well, what if I would have went a little bit easier on those first few years?
Yeah.
But that is there's the other what if. Well, what if you did not go as hard as what you did, but you never get the contract extension?
Right.
So that's the weird part.
Yes.
Now, this is the better question, and I'm sure it did with you. Does it have to change over the years that you're in the league because you're getting beat up just naturally, just in the game, right?
Yeah.
And then at what pace should it change? And then how did it change for you?
Yeah. I definitely think I probably could have changed my approach to training as the older I got. Especially with the more I know now, about, touching certain percentages and how many times you actually need to do that to maintain absolute strength.
Mm-hmm.
These are all things I kind of really learned when I was done playing, unfortunately.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. But for me, it was just more of the mental comfort of knowing where I was. I think that helped me play better, sleep better, and just obviously, be more content and happy. Of knowing, this is where I should be, and I'm there. But at the same time, towards years 7, 8, 9, I probably would have, if I was to change anything, I think I would have tried to work on speed a little bit more. As I was getting older, and especially now, if you look at linebackers, they're just not as big as they used to be. Like, the game was changing towards the end of my career. Where they're becoming smaller, faster, asking to cover more, blitz more, and run a lot more. And I was a bigger linebacker. And it's tough to kind of be a bigger linebacker your entire life and have that mindset. And then, seeing these guys come in that are 220 pounds and called linebackers. Like, it actually kind of pissed me off for a year or two until I realized, okay, the game's just changing. A lot of linebackers are coming to defensive linemen. A lot of safeties are becoming linebackers because they have to match the speed across the ball from them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the receivers are getting faster. They're throwing the ball a lot more. A lot of the running backs are converted receivers with really good hands. So the linebackers are just naturally asked to do a lot more. I had people, recommend, losing a lot of weight, basically just changing the whole style of how you play.
Mm-hmm.
So it was maybe doable. But it was something that, towards the end of my career, I wasn't really thrilled about doing. So I probably could have, worked on speed, agility, changed direction a little bit better. I think maybe I could have got another year or 2 out of it if I did that. But once again, who knows, right? It was just one of those deals where I had kind of been stuck in my ways for a long time. I had an identity, and, this is what I was, and this is how I liked playing. So that was really it.
With the recovery modalities, when did you, the hyperbaric chamber obviously came before everything, right? Then you messed with IV therapies, I assume Myers cocktails and
Yep.
all those different things. When did they get introduced? How did they get introduced?
Sure.
And then how did you physically work them in?
Yeah. So I was always really, really big on recovery. First purchase was a hyperbaric chamber. And then you kind of, you talk to a lot of guys in the locker room and around the league about, what they're doing and word of mouth of, this works, this doesn't, this is great. By my third year, I think I had somebody at my house every single day working on me in some kind of capacity, whether it was massage, ART, chiropractor, acupuncture, dry needling, IV, and then hyperbaric chamber was non-negotiable every single night anyway. So that was just in addition to, and then you kind of throughout your years figure out, what works better than others. I had a guy that would come over and stretch me. I mean, you name it, I tried it as far as recovery. Just because I wanted to feel as absolute best as I could and felt like it would, help me play better.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of those things also when you get to the NFL, you're just excited about because you have those resources now and you can reach out to people and talk to a lot of people too about, teammates and other guys that are in the NFL about what they do and what works for them.
That also opens you up, though, for a lot of people to be attracted to you that are going to bring the latest, greatest bunch of bullshit.
Oh, absolutely.
Too.
Absolutely.
So how did you vet through that?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't so great at it initially. I kind of said yes to everything. I mean, I had beds that shaked. I had all types of, DMS hammers and all that stuff. So I tried a lot of different things and unfortunately purchased a lot of different things that eventually, did not work and were kind of handed down or thrown out. But it just, a lot of trial and error. And then finally by year, probably 4, kind of having a set routine of exactly knowing what works, what I enjoy doing, or if there is a newest, latest, greatest thing, doing a little bit more research first and asking some people than just, being the first one to hop on and try it out.
What were some of the 3 or 4 things that were working?
Yeah. I always, day after a game and usually Wednesday, I was always doing some kind of soft tissue massage. Right. I learned later in my career, it's one of those things you don't want to do 48 hours before a game or more, just because, relaxation of the muscle and keeping everything firing. I worked a lot of ART, was great. My acupuncture dry needling guy was incredible. And then the IVs were great. I eventually started trying DMSO in my IV, which was unbelievable. But unfortunately, the smell, I guess.
The IVs make you smell enough.
Which is crazy because if you have it, you don't smell it. But eventually our linebacker room could not meet because it was me and another guy would get DMSO IVs and smelled so bad that no one would even go in the same room. And eventually my wife was like, listen, you have to stop doing that. Our bed sheets stink. It's just terrible. Made me feel great, right? So that was the IV therapy, the dry needling, soft tissue work, massage, and hyperbaric chamber were like my staples.
So did they come out then after the season? Or did they stay in year round?
They stayed in year round. Obviously, the amount of how I was doing it would kind of drop off a little bit.
Yeah.
But, I would say massage in the off season was once a week. Dry needling was probably once every 2-3 weeks more is, when I needed it. IVs was probably once a week. And I still hyperbaric chambered pretty much every day in the off season.
Did you find the effectiveness of these would wear over time, wear out?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I don't think so. I think they were all, really good and productive and helped, especially as I got older, just the amount of soreness. And I needed to actually do some of it a little bit more. So that would pick up depending on, workload and what a game looked like and just age was everything incorporated into it.
Over the period of your time in the league, did your intensity of the practices begin to lower?
No.
So my question where I'm going here is usually I'm going to assume the game is going to be harder to recover from than the practice.
Yeah.
But if you're practicing like insane all the time, it's still going to be a demand to recover from.
It is. Yeah, it is. That, looking back, so I when we talk more about, it woulda, coulda, shoulda, all that stuff, I think the training was never going to change. I think if anything, I could have cut back on the intensity of practice. It just became, though, where, it was an identity of a middle linebacker, and if there's a lead play or a power play or anything, and I'm expected to blow a guy up, in my mind, I have to blow the guy up, right? And anything less would be kind of. It became a point where if I didn't, then the questions would start being asked. What's he doing? Is he okay? Is he the same guy? So, ego played a large part into that. Wish I could have checked that a little bit better, but I remember, year 9 in training camp, going full speed in goal line, like 6-7 plays in a row. One of them, like, pretty sure concussion, and our starting center coming up and being like, "Dude, what are you doing?" He's like, "You're 31 years old. Like, you don't have to go that hard." I said, "Yeah, but I don't want you guys to score." And him being like, "Holy shit, like, dude, it's practice." And it was kind of like, he said that, I was like, yeah, it is practice. Maybe I can, reserve some of this and save it for when it's needed. But it was just, it's a super competitive sport, and I wanted to be the most competitive guy. And as the middle linebacker and captain of the defense, I felt that it was my job to kind of set the tone of practice.
Yeah.
And I didn't want it to be the other way. Now, year 6, 7, 8, 9, it didn't help that Mike Vrabel was my linebacker coach, who was just as nuts as me, if not worse. So if I was, slacking off or not hitting something, I had a guy on my back right away telling me, that's not okay. So great coach, a guy that I did not want to let down. I felt that I needed to prove it with intensity.
Yeah. Well, I wonder then if you don't bring that, then it lowers the expectations of the other people, the other guys on the field.
Sure. Yeah. I think my biggest fear, too, was that if I didn't practice like that or play like that, I was giving them a reason to get rid of the older guy. Because it's such a competitive league. There's always a 22-year-old, 23-year-old linebacker ready to step in.
Yeah.
Every year. Every year there's a newer, younger guy that would cost a lot less than you that they could put out there. And I felt like any little play or thing turned down was a reason for them to make that move. So I loved being an NFL football player. I wanted to stay in that role as long as I possibly could. So I had a lot of fear that could eventually happen.
Now at USC, were you there the full 4 years?
Yes.
Okay. So you came in with people that you came out with.
Yeah.
So 4 years.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen in the NFL.
No.
So how does that work? Because you need to build camaraderie to be able to have a winning season.
Yeah.
Right. There's got to be chemistry in the team. The team have to have a unified goal to win.
I know.
But the guy you're playing with may not be there 6 months from now or a year from now.
Yeah.
What is that like, or do you just get used to it after a while?
So at first it was like shocking, honestly, and seeing guys cut, and it was just like a revolving door of the roster. Like I remember one season, the guy in my locker next to me changed 6 times. It was like by the 6th time, I'm like, "Hey, dude, nice to meet you. Don't want to tell you, but I don't know how long you're going to be here. Like there's 5 other guys here this season." So at first it was like like upsetting, honestly. It was, to see that many guys coming through, get cut, get close to somebody, they're traded, they're released. And like you're saying, at the same time, you're trying to, build a culture, and it's kind of really tough when it's always changing as far as the people that you're trying to do it with. But the longer that you're in it, I think you kind of become used to it, and honestly, a little like cold, right? It just makes you. I wasn't, as upset anymore when you see a guy, walking out of the locker room knowing he got his release form in his hand. You kind of become used to it, unfortunately. But at the same time, I think the best teams, and when we were good, kind of kept a certain unit together, and knowing these 5-6 guys are going to be here, and whoever else is in the locker room, let's try to get them on board with us.
I got it.
Yeah. It's a weird deal though, because like you're saying, college guys can't get cut. They're there, right? If they leave, it's usually more on their choice. And then you get to the NFL, and it's like there's different teammates in there every single week. It's tough. It's tough to get used to. It's tough to kind of work and trust guys that just got there. But you just gotta go with what you're dealt.
Well, where I'm going with this is we were talking earlier for the podcast about different college conditioning programs, in the world that I come from, people will criticize, but I don't think they see everything.
Yeah.
Right. To where a story I've told a few times, and I won't mention the school, was, I visited many schools, and one time I'm watching a training session. I'm like, this is just fucking so terrible. It was terrible. It was terrible. It was terrible. I mean, I can't, I've repeated it like 5 times.
Yeah.
But even like the hammer strength lat pull downs were fucking terrible, and they were force reps, and it was terrible. Everything that I saw. And then as I was going home, something hit me where I realized, for the first time out of all these different universities I've been to over many, many years, this is the first time I ever saw the teamwork that I saw that day. So yes, it was bad, but every one of the 4 guys in that crew all were working their asses off, and all wanted the other person to make progress more than they wanted to make themselves, so it seemed.
Yeah.
And then all these little pods all worked within this one big pod.
Right.
And then lo and behold, they're one of the top 4 teams, that next year. And then so I leave wondering, so now at this point, it's like, fuck, does this even matter? Right? Because what matters is to get them all on the same page.
Yeah.
To be willing to, go to war with their brother.
Right.
And be willing to sacrifice to make them better.
Sure.
And vice versa. And it was the first time I saw it. So then it still fucks with my head.
Yeah.
Because I've seen other programs that you're like, everything's just on point conditioning wise.
Yeah.
But fucking dude's got headphones on. One guy's got no headphones on. There's no camaraderie. There's no teamwork.
Right.
So there's way more going on here.
Yeah.
Than what a lot of coaches give credit.
Sure. No, there's something to that, getting that many guys on the same page. And obviously, some of these schools too have, such better athletes than other schools they're playing against. But if you can get guys to have the same kind of mindset and like-minded guys with the same goal and same intentions, I tell people all the time, I look at my career with the Texans, and I think 2011 was our best season. In 2012 and 13, we had a way more talented roster. But 2011 was our best season because of, we dealt with a lot of adversity, but it was guys that absolutely loved playing together. And it was guys that did not want to let the guy next to them down when they went out there.
Mm-hmm.
So there was such a tight-knit group that, we won games we probably shouldn't have. But we were just, we had it in our mind that we were winning the game. And it was the same thing with USC.
Mm-hmm.
Pete did an unbelievable job of recruiting good players, but recruiting guys with good mindsets and recruiting team-first guys. So I think if you can get guys that are all on the same page and have the same goal, you have a much better chance of success in winning. Mm-hmm. When they're all like-minded, team-first guys that don't want to let each other down. That's gonna be tough to beat, no matter what the workouts are looking like, unfortunately. And like you're saying, even though, some of the workouts were just absolutely terrible, they bought in, right? They bought in and thought it was making them better. And there's something to that. And when you get 53 to a college number, 90 plus guys all believing that, good things are probably going to happen.
Yeah. When you went from, high school to USC, everybody there is good.
Yeah.
So it's a big jump.
Sure.
Then when you went to the pros, was that jump just as big or bigger?
I think it was different for my case because we were so talented at USC. And I was going to the Texans, who had, at that point, never made the playoffs. We were a newer organization. We were young. I think the biggest thing that kind of was mind-blowing to me was going to the NFL and seeing how many guys just didn't like training. I walked to the weight room and, seeing top guys kind of going through the motions, checking their card and telling me like, hey man, I like the way you train, but that's not going to last forever. You still got that college mindset. Just like, no, I got the mindset. I want to get better, and this is going to help me get better. But those were the guys that, weren't around as long as they should have been.
Mm-hmm.
So, that was the biggest eye-opening experience to me. And the talent wasn't that big of a difference from college. Like I said, it was just a unique situation because I was coming from USC.
Yeah.
During the peak of that program. So, it was pretty easy transition as far as talent. It was more of the transition as far as mindset that kind of, shocked me a little bit.
Oh, because you're on your own now.
Well, you're on your own, but just, the guys that, there's so much more freedom when you walk into an NFL locker room or NFL weight room than the college weight room, right? Your college weight room is, everybody better be doing exactly what they're doing and the amount of reps. You walk into an NFL weight room, it's like you can tell guys are like halfway out the door, some of them, because usually it's the last thing they have that day too.
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to get out of there as fast as possible. Where in college you're there,
mm-hmm.
and you better be doing exactly what you're saying, or you're either punished or eventually kicked out.
Yeah.
And then you go to the NFL and guys are training that are making millions of dollars, more than the strength coach,
mm-hmm.
right? So their level of importance becomes a lot higher than, say, a kid in college.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a little bit of an eye-opening experience to me.
Well, at the same time, now because you have kids, in college you don't have kids, right? So a lot of these guys also, granted, a lot of them probably still didn't want to work hard.
Yes.
But they had something else that they wanted to get home to.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was a very interesting experience. Was just, how different everybody was in the NFL locker room. You had guys closer to 40 years old, all the way down to 21, 22 years old. You had guys with, 5 kids. You had guys that, weren't married at all. So, very different agendas once they left the building, and very different days that they had, for them. So that was, it was a pretty cool experience getting to know everybody, seeing, where they're from, are they married or whatever else that comes with it. So, a very diverse locker room for sure in the NFL.
So as you being a leader of that team, how do you lead that? And add in the factor they may not be there in 6 months.
Yeah. I always just believe, leadership first comes from the example, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think.
But it has to be more than that.
No, it does. It definitely is. I just think it starts there, right? I think, in order for your voice to have any validity, there has to be some proof with the work that you're putting, right? And I think I try to be the most consistent person every single day. I also try to relate with as many guys as possible. Try to keep the message always consistent. Whatever I believed in, that's what you kind of stuck behind and rode with. But then you're trying to get a message across to a guy that's 35, 4 kids, and 22 years old. The guy's a playboy, doing whatever he wants. So you have to relate to a lot of different people and a lot of different mindsets. So I think just keeping the message as consistent as possible. Once again, being open-minded, kind of hearing what they're saying, and lastly, leading by example. I think it's a pretty good combination for say a captain leadership role.
Mm-hmm. When you went into the game, when you were on the field, so game day, what is the mindset, and how did you develop that over time?
Yeah. I think it was, I still remember my 3rd game in the NFL, and we were 1-2. We had just lost to the Jaguars. And I remember pulling it into the gas station and being like, I think I lost 4 games in college, 3 or 4 games. And I'd already lost 2 in the NFL. And I go into a locker room, and it was kind of like, nobody was really that upset. Where, you know, in college, we lose a game, nobody said a word. You know, we could be flying back from Oregon and everyone's dead quiet, just mortified, upset, just crushed. And it becomes almost more normal in the NFL just because you're playing against every team that has talented all-star players that are making a lot of money. Every team's going to be good you play against. So that was kind of another eye-opening experience to me. As far as mindset, I just knew when I was in that gas station that it reminded me I hated losing, and I hated that people were okay with it. So, you know, I felt like I tried to pick my game up a little bit more. Couldn't say as much as I'd like to because I was still in my third game in the NFL. But I just wanted to change the mindset in that locker room that winning wasn't okay. So I just you know, strived and worked as hard as I possibly could to kind of get guys on board with me. And, you know, eventually by year one, we went 9-7. It was the first winning season in Texans history, my rookie year. And by our third year, we were division champs and in the playoffs. So things were working. And I felt I contributed to that and I helped that. But I think the biggest thing I brought to the locker room was really the work ethic and mindset. You know, that this is what we expect, and anything less is, you know, not okay.
Well, it's also what you bring to the field, right? Because this is a violent game.
Yeah.
Right? It's a violent, aggressive game.
Sure.
You know, so your compassion in the locker room don't mean shit on the field, right?
Right.
And nor does theirs.
Yeah.
Right? So how did you flick that switch?
Yeah.
When to go on the field?
It was, you know, it was really never a problem for me. And it was taught to me from a young age. And my dad always told me, whenever you stepped over the white line, there's no friends.
Yeah.
He went a little extreme with it. You know, he would even tell me, on your own team, there's no friends.
Yeah.
Like, you are out there to prove a point, be the best, and win. Got it. You know, so I went with that and had that from a very young age. You almost have to be two different guys, honestly. You know, you're a locker room guy, and then you're an on the field guy. And the on the field guy is locked in and violent killer. And I had no problem walking from the locker room down the tunnel onto the field, flipping a switch. That it was time to go. Because once again, that's where I felt most comfortable. Right, that's where I thrived and felt like myself. Was on a football field with 80,000 people screaming, and guys across from you want to kick your ass. Like that was my home. So, you know, flipping the switch was no problem. The hardest thing was actually flipping the switch off sometimes. You know, game ended, locker room, going home, and still so fired up. You know, my family was like, all right, you know, Brian, it's relax.
Well, you
it's
still
over.
have to be able to, at some point, you know, I'm trying to relate this to, you know, this my own sport. Like, yes, I need to be aggressive under a weight, but I have to not be too fucking aggressive because I still have to do the skill that I'm supposed to do.
Absolutely.
But I still want to fucking kill it with everything that I possibly have. So there's a balance, you know, with that, to where you're in a zone per se. And, you know, are there games that you don't really remember that well because it was so locked in?
Yeah. You know, I think it got to a point where I had to kind of figure out not 100%, but 90% and still 10% functional, right? Where it's like, okay, I still have to call plays and read offenses and make adjustments and audibles, where if I'm so fired up and crazy, I'm not gonna be able to do all that. So being able to tone it down a little bit, but once the ball snapped, going 100% again, and in between plays, it was kind of the perfect combination of, you know, football is, you know, these quick bursts, you know, then seconds off, and then right back to it again, and then you're going on the bench and sitting while the offense and special teams are doing it. Yeah. So it's these flows throughout the game, but, you know, I got pretty good at being able to communicate and function and do all the things I had to do, and then go 100% during the play, and then, you know, tone it back to 75, 70 on the bench. You know, we're talking to a coach, or talking to the defense, halftime. It was just, after the game, I wish I could have dialed it back a little bit sooner, because I was, you know, it's such a high level of intensity, it's tough to turn it off. It almost, you know, naturally turns off later in the day for you when everything wears off. But I remember doing post-game interviews and, like,
That's fucked up.
shaking a little bit
Yeah.
still, because it's like the game ended 10 minutes ago. So it was, it's definitely an interesting balance, especially as a linebacker. I think it is tough to achieve, especially with everything else that goes into it.
Well, you have a reputation of training or playing insane, right? So that's a whole different level that a lot of other guys will go to.
Yeah.
And so to be at that level, you're in a different place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I would say it's a place where, would it be fair to say you'd be willing to die on the field in that state?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that's a different.
It is. Yeah, I've said that before. I truly did believe it, because, my entire life, that was the pinnacle of where I wanted to get to. Right. And I think the mindset of doing whatever it took to win on the field gave us the best chance to win, because I felt like the guys across from me that I was playing against wouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think going that little extra mile could help us win the game.
Yeah.
Because it's I think if you have that mindset and you're playing against somebody that doesn't have that mindset, you already feel like you have an advantage. So that was kind of where I try to get to and relay the message to the rest of the team. And obviously there's certain guys that weren't willing to do that, and that's okay. But that was, it's, tough, brutal sport. And you got to go all out at sometimes.
Yeah. Well, at USC, you said you were tapping a sign that said all in.
Yeah.
Right. So all in means something different to everybody. I've said on the podcast several times, one person's all in is the most all in they've ever been on one thing.
Yeah.
Another person's all in could be, a very, very, very different dark place.
Yes. No doubt.
Where you've lived there, in that all in place.
Yeah.
So the question I have for people that know what I'm talking about is, if you find yourself you do jiu-jitsu or something like that in a different sport now, would you be willing to go all in at that same level again?
Yeah. So just talking about jiu-jitsu, I started training about 3 years ago. And, everybody asked me when I was going to start competing, when are you going to compete? When are you going to compete? And I said, I'll compete when I can dedicate myself 100% to it, because I don't want to go out there and lose a match because I know I only trained twice last week. And it's just impossible, now with 3 kids to train 6 days a week with lifting and resistance training on top of it too. Like, there's just not enough hours in the day anymore while having a family. So I would 100% go all in if I could, right? But the all in now would be totally different than when I was playing and it was my profession. But the Brazilians, our professor down there says this thing. He says blood in the eyes. There's certain guys that have the blood in the eyes when they're competing, and it's that look that he says when you're competing against a guy, or you have it, you're all in and willing to do whatever it takes to win out there. And in training, I do. I go all in. I roll with the black belts. I try to compete as best as I possibly can. But I couldn't go all in the way I'd like to and compete unless, a lot of things changed, obviously. So, I'm all in on coaching my kids now, right? As best as I possibly can. I got beat up enough too.
You still have a beast inside though?
For sure.
So where does that come out? Because you can't keep that tame.
No, and it does come out in training. It does come out in jiu-jitsu. Toned back a lot more, obviously. I think it just it's gotten less the older I've gotten, and that's okay. But it is still there. It's just not as prevalent anymore, or as doesn't come out as much as it used to.
Yeah.
Right. But there are certain instances where it does, and jiu-jitsu has been a really good transition for me as that type of guy to continue to do something that feeds that a little bit, as a very competitive physical sport, but also with a almost a locker room mentality outside, right? Where you can battle, go to war, do all that, and then still talk and hang out with the guys afterwards. I think is an important component of the sport.
With you working as a strength coach for a couple years, and your history of many different strength coaches, but all that aside, you've learned more about training than most people are probably give you credit for.
Sure.
Right. So I don't want to ask you about your period as the strength coach, because there's outliers with who you're working with, and there's people that don't want to train. So the question is going to be a little bit different. And you probably do this now, there's probably people in the league that have the same training mentality or close to it that you do. Maybe not your 10, but like an 8.
Yeah.
And they're asking you for advice and help and mentorship. And you've made your mistakes along the way, figured out what works, what not works.
Sure.
What's some of the advice that you give them? What's the most common area that as soon as they're telling you their story, you're like, dude, you need to stop doing this, or you need to start doing this?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is when I tell them, if they feel good, get after it. If you're a little banged up or something's bothering you, get it checked out, right? Instead of training through, the nicks and bruises and stuff. I've just realized now, being done and then going back and coaching for a little bit, a lot of that workload and foundation is already built, right? If you miss a training session, you're not going to play terrible because of it. So, I think I've gotten a lot more focused as far as recovery and just a longevity of an athlete now. So talking with them, and I did for 2 years talk with some guys that, couldn't imagine, missing a day because, their elbow has to get drained. Where it's like, dude, that might be the best thing, because if you don't, we're going to have to continue to drain it, every single week for the rest of the season. So I think just as far as, longevity and guys taking care of themselves, that's the biggest advice I'd give them, especially if they are not, the most talented guys, where, then their durability is going to become their primary thing and the most important thing for them to stay in the building.
And so with that, from the strength and conditioning standpoint, how would you advise them there? I mean, obviously you're not going to tell them to be a power lifter.
Sure.
But more the core movements, where do you think you could have done things better? Because you can say lifting heavy is one thing, but that's relative to a bazillion different exercises.
Sure. Yeah. I think a lot of it is position specific, right? What exactly are they asked to do in the field, and how should they be training for that, right? So I'm going to talk to or give advice to a D lineman a lot differently than a receiver.
Yeah.
Right, and exactly what movements that needs to be incorporated or what that looks like. As far as exact lifts or certain things, as an assistant strength coach, it was kind of tough to tell them what they could or couldn't do.
This is somebody, what I'm saying? This is just a buddy of yours that's asking for your advice.
Yeah. I would advise in the off season, obviously, to get after it. I would probably, do my upper lower splits. And then my secondary days, Thursday, Friday, I would probably work more on speed or faster lifts, right? That's, kind of be my explosive leg days. Or
what do you mean by faster lifts?
So I always liked, when I was training, to split, my double leg pushes to be on a Monday.
Okay.
And then was more single leg work later in the week, incorporated with some plyos and jumping and all that kind of stuff. So as far as, I look at it now, did I really need a second push day every single week in the off season? I'm not sure. Did it make me feel a lot more at home mentally? Yeah, it did, because it's something I always did. But I would also advise probably the guys that there's, an off day is truly not a day of just doing nothing, though. Like, I think that doing some kind of exercise, whether it's to build up aerobic capacity, whether it's, to go try something like jiu-jitsu, or, maybe a little bit of strongman training. Like I always loved doing that in the off season too, because it was just a different kind of training, a different kind of strength that I think, correlated to the football field really well. So, once again, I think a lot of it would be very, very position specific on exactly what they're doing on the field. I know a lot of DBs, defensive backs, that didn't like to lift heavy, where it's like, no, that's okay. You can lift heavy. It's almost like this girl mindset where they feel like they're going to get too bulky, right? And they're not going to be able to move or be who they are. Where it's like, no, that's not actually how it works, right? It's going to help you, play longer and move better and be faster. So, I think a lot of it would vary exactly what I would tell them based upon what they're asked to do on the football field or body type.
Yeah. So same question now, but it's a high school kid.
Yeah.
Because now they have more freedom because a lot of them don't have strength coaches.
Yeah. I think for the high school kids, I'm seeing a lot of it now, is get really good at the lifts before you start putting a lot of weight on. Like get the movement down correctly, build the foundation, especially with kids even younger than high school now. I see them jump right into a program and they're barbell squatting, but really don't even know how to, squat at all. Or they don't know how to land, or they don't know how to jump, right? And they're doing these crazy parachute exercises and all this stuff. And, knees are caving in on every single landing and the ankles are rolling out on certain pushes. So I think, learning the basics first, especially at a younger age, is way more important than jumping right into the big lifts. So understanding first, how to jump, how to land, how to run correctly. And then, you can transition into now some more resistance training done right first. Like in our gym, we have, guys that are interested in squatting that never have done it before. We have one of the, those kind of teach bars, 25 pounds, right? So they understand a loading pattern first before they put, 245s on each side, and understanding what it looks like and what's the correct depth and, how does my chest, stay up, and do my knees cave in, or my feet even. So every little detail, I think, it should be taught and understood first before you get into the real, kind of compound lifting. And as far as the high school kids, eat as much as you possibly can. Eat whenever you're hungry, eat when you're not hungry. Train as much as possible, but do it correctly. It's tough to tell a kid he needs a rest because usually they're never sore, right? They're never beat up. They're just not at that point yet where they don't feel it. So start listening to your body at a younger age too, and understanding what it's telling you.
Nutritionally, you were always paid attention to that over your entire career. What were some of the things that you did that were probably that you would not do again?
Yes. Number one, eating every 2 hours.
Yeah.
Right. The small, consistent feeding time. Obviously now I just have dove a little bit more into that and understood, macros and reaching a certain number, and it doesn't need to be in 2 hour increments. So that was my biggest stress, where it was, every 2 hours I'd have my watch beeping and I'd go, make my next meal, where, I've kind of now realized probably the most important time, nutritionally, is before or after the workout. So that's kind of my real, focus now. And then I can vary my foods up. It doesn't have to be white rice and chicken every single meal, right? I can use different proteins and carbs. Just as long as I'm hitting my certain number, I kind of want to be around. I'm not as strict and as crazy as I used to be about it. And honestly, I'm doing better because it's not driving me crazy anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So it's giving me a lot of mental freedom to kind of enjoy more food and train better and not go crazy about it. So
how do you train now currently?
Yeah. So I still train through Joe Defranco's app. I'm on it every single day. Monday, Tuesday, I got my first upper Monday, first upper lower. Wednesday is usually a day I will incorporate some kind of cardio. I usually haven't been doing it as much, but want to get back into jiu-jitsu again. Wednesdays, Thursday is my second upper body. Friday is my second lower body. And then Saturday would like to kind of get back into sprinting again. Just, to kind of be able to still do that. Just so I can if I ever need to. And Sunday is probably my actual true kind of rest day, but I still try to at least walk or do something. So I'm just, I do a lot better when I'm working out. You know, I always, when I was playing, there was a couple different times I'd say, when I'm done playing, I'm never going to train again. That would never happen. It's just, it's me and something I have to do and feel a lot more comfortable and better when I do something.
Do you find that it's because the intent is different?
Sure.
Right. So do you find it harder to be motivated to do the sessions when there's no real, because health is not a good intent.
Yeah.
Right. It's not motivating enough for me to give a fuck about.
No, I think the biggest thing that motivates me is I don't want to look like the other dads that, my kids are hanging out with. Yeah. So I kind of want to stay away from the whole stereotypical dad bod kind of deal. I love going somewhere and my kids being like, that's my dad, so the motivation, obviously, just you want to look good, but, I want to still functionally stay as strong as possible and athletic as possible. I think it helps with longevity too, but it for me, it's my mental more than anything. Of going into the gym, getting after it, knowing I can still do things, I think it just keeps me younger mentally.
I think throughout most of our lives, people, they'll come and go, but certain people make bigger impacts than others, either because of something they said or something they didn't say. Yeah. Looking past or through your career, who were some of those people and what were those things that were said? Yeah.
Obviously my parents played a huge role in my upbringing and still communication, to today. Joe Defranco was, the first guy that kind of introduced me, to the weight room. So him, we've talked a lot about what he's taught me and things that he said. I think Joe was really good. He had a really good coaching eye. He's not as intense as people think he would be. He's actually more mild-mannered and smart guy, really understands strength conditioning and programming. I've never seen a guy predict a lift as well as he would. There's certain times where I would just absolutely crush something and want to add, 25, 50 more pounds. And he would, say, add 10. And I barely get it. Yeah. And it was like, how the hell did you know that? So he had a really good coaching eye and understood athletes really well. I never saw a guy ever get hurt at his gym, which is insane if you think about how many times I've been there and how many athletes have gone through there. My high school coach, a guy named Fred Stengel, was football coach, was an absolute nut job, but a hell of a master motivator. Just a guy that knew how to motivate certain guys different ways. He knew what buttons he had to push on me and things he had to say to me, and he got me going, no problem.
What's one of the things that he said?
One time we were walking off the field my junior year, and it was a walkthrough, like middle of the season, and I dropped like 2 passes in the walkthrough. I'm high school, it's walkthrough, whatever. And we're walking off, and mind you, I become first team All-State this same season. And he asked to talk to me after practice. I said, yeah, no problem. And he said, Brian, let me talk to you for a second whenever you get a chance. I said, no problem, coach. So we go through the rest of practice and ends. He calls me up and waits for everybody to walk off the field. He goes, I figured it out with you. I think I got it. Yeah, coach, what's up? What is it? You're just not that good anymore. And just turns around and walks away from me. And I sat on the field for like 10 minutes and watched him walk the entire way up. And just pissed me off so bad. Where if he said it to another kid, it probably would have, broke them down and they wouldn't respond. And next day I went out and probably had the best game of that season. Where it was like always in my mind that he said that and just wanted to just prove him wrong, but also prove him right, because he knew it wasn't, that wasn't the truth. So he was a hell of a motivator and very interesting old school guy. So he was great. went on to college. Pete Carroll was a unbelievable guy to learn from. Just a psychological genius as far as motivating. He can have a room cracking up laughing and dead quiet within 30 seconds, like that, and locked back in. So it was interesting to see his coaching approach. Ken Norton Jr. was my linebacker coach in college, and that guy was as tough as a coach as you'll ever have. But just an incredible guy to learn from, and taught me how to play linebacker, taught me how to watch film, taught me how to practice, taught me how to act and go about myself, and real just personality more than anything. Son of a heavyweight champion boxer. So, he had a tough upbringing too, and he brought it into our linebacker room and just believed in me. Just a hell of a guy. Then went on to the NFL and had numerous guys I looked up to. The new head coach of the Texans is DeMeco Ryans. He was in his fifth year when I was drafted as a rookie. He took me under his wing. Taught me how to be a pro, but, taught me how to be a man off the field too, and taught me about the responsibilities of life and what comes with it, and just reminded me of, who I wanted to be. Had some good head coaches down there. Gary Kubiak was an awesome guy. Wade Phillips was my defensive coordinator. Just super laid back, but super successful guy. Trying to think who else. There's met so many people in that locker room, in that building, that really helped. And those were some of the biggest names right there that really, changed, who I was and how I thought and how I perceived things.
With all these influences, how are you going to use, the skills and attributes that they helped bring out in you to bring out in others? Yeah.
You take bits and pieces from everybody you learn from, and use the things you like, and don't use the things that didn't really resonate or help you. So I think it's the constant reflection and trying to improve yourself, and thinking back on things that they said and taught, and how you can kind of reiterate the messages and teaching points that they did that really helped you. Not saying it might not help somebody. That might not happen. I can say something that really helped me to somebody else, and they don't think anything of it, right? But I think as long as I get that message across, there's a chance. So, like I said, you take those bits and pieces of different people.
Where do you see yourself positioned? Where do you see yourself positioned to be able to provide those messages?
Yeah,
through your training facility.
Yeah. Through my training facility, at home, obviously, camps, right? Or if I, the 2 years I worked back in the building. I thought it was a cool kind of bridge between player and coach, because it was an interesting dynamic. I was coaching a lot of guys I played with, so at times it was a little tough, right? Because the guys still wanted to treat you like a player, but it's kind of, I can't act like that anymore. I'm a coach. But I was able to, administer a lot of advice. A lot of guys would come into my office just to sit and talk, about everything. Ask everything from being a parent to being a linebacker. What's like being a coach, to guys that would, eventually possibly want to coach. So it was a pretty cool role. I learned a lot from being back there and being able to talk with, the players in NFL and other coaches too there. So I think the biggest place, though, that I can kind of help people and reiterate my message is probably my training facility, just based upon volume of people that come through there. And a lot of kids, younger kids with dreams and aspirations of eventually being pro athletes. And it's one of the things about football. I think it's a hell of a teacher. I tell the kids that come to my camps, whether you make it or not, you're going to learn a lot from the sport. It's going to make you a better person, right? Because I think football teaches you to become the ultimate teammate. So if you're playing pro sports, or if you're working in corporate America, like, you got to be a teammate. You got to learn how to work with people, in order to succeed, because, a team is always stronger than, an individual effort. So it's been a pretty cool experience at my facility, and seeing, younger kids, high school kids, college kids, all trying to make it. And hearing the questions they ask is pretty cool.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't see you just like retiring and riding off into the sunset, right?
Yeah.
So there's too much there to offer to be able to help,
Yeah.
inspire and motivate those
Sure.
younger youth athletes and so forth
Yeah.
that are there in that facility. And you've been doing it for a couple of years now.
Yeah, about a year now.
Okay, so over a year. And the more you're doing that, I mean, you're already seeing it with your kids. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you feel when your kid hits a home run?
I mean, I'm just, there's nothing to describe it, right? Because it's, especially my older boy, like the amount of work he puts in, when he does something right, it's kind of like, that's why you do it, right? So, no, it's incredible to see. It's incredible just to see the journey of, your own child and where they were 2 years ago, and then what they're doing now and what you see them, where you see them getting to in the future. It's different than coaching a kid when you get him when he's 18 years old,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because I saw this kid born, and now he's doing like, young teen stuff. So it's a mind-blowing experience, but like you said, just something you try to grasp and hold on to because it goes super quick, but no, it's always cool to see now as a father and a coach, to see the results.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about a time when on the field, when you're playing as a pro, where shit was just not going right. And, I mean, there's multiple times,
Yeah.
but just really not going right. And then something happened to change the momentum.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of those moments.
What's the first one that comes to your mind?
There was a lot of moments where shit just wasn't going right at all, right? So I think 2015 we were 3-5. No, 2-5. And we had played in Miami and we just got our ass kicked. I mean, our quarterback got hurt, our running back Arian Foster tore his Achilles. It was pouring. And we're just every pass that they threw was a touchdown. Every pass we threw was, I swear to God, interception for a touchdown going the other way. It was like 42-7. It's pouring. They're going crazy. And I remember Rabel just sitting down just during the game, like, I need you guys to just go out there, continue playing hard, and don't put any bullshit on film. Like, just grind through this one. And although we got our ass kicked and flew home and felt terrible about it, 2-5, we just gave up 49 points or something. We ended up turning it around for some reason. I think it was just because that point was so miserable, and no one really broke. It's a game where, on the bus ride and the plane ride, in the locker room, everyone could be pointing fingers. Everyone can be saying, this is why we lost. This guy sucks. The coach's decision was terrible. Didn't really happen. So we had made some couple roster changes, and a couple guys that were starting weren't starting anymore, and other guys got elevated. We ended up turning it around and winning the division and making the playoffs. From 2-5 to, I think we finished like 10-6 or something. Won a division, went to the playoffs. That was a kind of resilient, proud moment. In our organization that kind of was back against the wall. Nobody thought we can do it. Didn't make it far in the playoffs, but just the fact that we were still able to turn that around and get in the playoffs and do some good things that year was a pretty cool moment. So I mean, there was plenty of instances where we had better teams, and finger pointing happens, and people start blaming, talking in the locker room, and it's never a good result when stuff like that happens. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about yourself personally? It's not saying that you ever got to a point where you said, that's it, I'm done. But for a split second, you thought, you considered it, but then came back from that.
Probably 2013. My second time, I completely blew my knee out. We were in Arrowhead, Kansas City, and I got cut block, and I had just taken my knee brace off from the previous year. So I was just feeling good. Went through a hell of rehab 2012 off an ACL. First 6 games in 2013, I wore a knee brace and was playing pretty well, but just I hated the thing. So I took it off. In the first game I took it off, I got cut block and blew my knee completely out again. So I was laying on my back at Arrowhead, just staring up at the sky, and was just like, this, like, fuck this. You know, that's it. I'm good. I can't do it again. But, you know, obviously rehab, that was my 5th year in the NFL. So obviously just kind of rehabbed, got through it, came back. 2014, had a good year. 2015, 2016 had much better years. But that was probably the closest I was to just saying, you know, hanging it up and not being able to do it again. Was that couple hours that, you know, started on the ground looking up at the sky in Kansas City, where I was physically and mentally exhausted. Didn't think I could do it again.
Now, on the flip side, when you think back on your career, there's always going to be highlights, right? So what's a couple? I don't want to say what's the number one, because that's going to be way too hard for you to think of the number one. But what are some of the highlights that you're going to remember even when you're 80 years old thinking back?
I think, you know, the thing I take most pride in is, you know, before I got to the organization, they never had a winning season. They never made the playoffs. And 2011, clinching up in Cincinnati and watching another game. I think it was the Colts were playing somebody. And the second they lost, we were automatically in one division. And, you know, guys, you know, we didn't have any alcohol or anything, but guys were, you know, shaking Diet Cokes and spraying them all over the locker room and stuff. It was just, you know, it was a first thing to be a part of. First time that NFL organization had ever been a part of something like that. So I think I just take most pride in turning that corner for that team. You know, being a part of that, something we all accomplished together. We came in, we knew what the past looked like, and we wanted to change it. You know, we had a large part in doing that. So that was a really cool thing to be a part of.
What about a play that you made that you'll always remember?
Probably 2013, first game of the year. I was coming back off my ACL. It was my first game back. I had just gotten a new contract. People were like, why the hell would you pay him coming off an ACL? You know, who knows if we'll ever be the same. And we were down 21-0 in San Diego and ended up tying it 21-21 in the fourth quarter. I intercepted Phillip Rivers and returned it for a touchdown, 28-21. We ended up winning the game. The play was cool, but it was the work that went into coming back to make that play. Yeah. You know, there's the off season, the ups and downs, the extra surgery I had to have after having the major surgery. It was the times I had to get my knee drained. It was the times I had to do the same workout for the 37th time in a row, right? It was the warm-ups I had to do, the sled pushes, the jumps, the rehab was painful, it was brutal. But to be able to get through that and then make that play to help the team win, that was it was a real resilient moment in my career and life that kind of proved to myself.
That's the reason why I asked that question, is because if it's somebody in strength sports and it's a lift, or if it's somebody in football and it's a play, the fans, the observers, just see the play. Yeah. And, you know, either it was a luck or, you know, whatever it's going to be, but they don't see everything that you just said that went into what made that play actually happen. Yeah. Where the amazing part about that is throughout a full game, how many times does that happen with how many different people? Sure. You know, that same story is playing, a different story is playing out with every guy that makes a big play. Right. Everyone. You know, or every lifter that makes a PR lift. Yeah. It's not just that snapshot. No. You know, it's the whole story. Yeah. Yeah. You know, which is cool as hell, especially if you're the observer and you know it. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of that, my wife and my dad were at the game, and, you know, you shower after the game. whatever, the adrenaline starts wearing off. Go to the locker room. My wife's just the parking lot. My wife's just bawling, crying. Because she was there for every step of the way. She saw the rehab. She knew the ups and downs and the struggles and the really dark days I had. To be back doing what I loved the most and doing it well and making a play to help the team win, she knew the story, right? So it kind of hit her even more than it did me.
So then how did that make you feel?
Just proud, you know. She had a large part in it too, she had a large part in my rehab and helping me come back and keeping me level-headed, helping me on really bad days. So it just real proud. Yeah, it was a really cool experience.
Now, any specific moments in the weight room where you do a lift and after that lift you're like, I am a motherfucker.
Oh yeah. No, there's a lot of those at all three levels: high school, college, NFL. Trying to think of exact instances. High school was, I feel like that was every day at Joe's, because it was just such a wild environment. We were always trying to. He had that big board of, all the leaders and the lifts and stuff. So that was always something. I think I had my name up there for 4 out of 7 of the lifts in high school. So that was very cool. College was probably the first time I benched 225 over 30 times. And it was one of those deals. You get up, you rack it, every guy's just looking at you, not like saying much, just like shit. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So it's it's a real good justifying moment. And the NFL, it wasn't as big as a crowd, right? If I did anything kind of cool, it was probably just me and the strength coach there and one of my training partners. So a couple big squats, that we hit, especially in season, which was pretty impressive considering the amount of, hitting and running and volume that was, incorporated with that. But there's a couple weight room stories and you see it too, especially when you're going for something in college and every single guy on the team's there for that. Like I loved our PR days. Those were the best, in college because it was such high energy and you always did a little bit better than you thought. And I think it was just so much of adrenaline played a part in that. So being able to be in the weight room for things like that, it made the team closer too. It always did. Like everybody working together, cheering each other on. It helps. It helps the football team, no doubt. And we all got better from that for sure.
I think I know the answer, but you think it because you still have the speed work that you're doing on the field. Is that dynamic similar to the weight room work, or is it different?
It's different.
Yeah,
it's different. It's intense, but not as intense.
Yeah,
it's competitive. It's definitely competitive. But I think there's just something. There's something different to the actual lift.
Yeah.
Right. The speed is cool, and you want to be athletic, you want to be fast, you want to be the fastest linebacker or a guy in your group. But there's just something different about the actual lift. I think that's a little bit more competitive and aggressive, for sure.
When you say competitive with the field work, how so?
Well, I think the linebackers just take more pride in lifting. Yeah. Right. So I think if you're the strongest guy, it's cooler than being the fastest guy.
Yeah.
I think it's just something ingrained in a linebacker's DNA. So, we would definitely, I think, put a little bit more stock in that. Like if you're fast, that's cool, whatever. Right. But if you're the strongest guy, like that's something to be proud of and wear around proudly.
Yeah. Who's the strongest guy you played against?
Man, there were some strong O-linemen. There were some strong tight ends too. Let's see. I played against my rookie year. Oh gosh, he was the old Kevin Mawai. I remember the first time he got his hands on me. It was his last year in the NFL, and just feeling like a grown man like grip, on your jersey, and one of those deals where I'm hitting and trying to get off, and no matter what I'm doing, like I got one hand off, but the other one's not coming. I'm like, damn, this guy's strong. You know, so I mean, every O lineman was pretty damn strong. Certain guys you definitely would rather avoid than hit, you know, head up, unless they weren't looking. You can kind of get to them first. But for the most part, you know, if you know, every O lineman is easily benching over 400 and moving pretty well. So yeah, I would say that was the most impressive thing in the NFL, was just the level of strength of every single offensive line you played against. You know, but there was definitely some real strong guys. Defensively, I'm more happy that I didn't have to play against some of the guys defensively, because I felt like some of them were even stronger than them. Like I remember Vince Wilfork coming into the weight room, and he's in his second to last year playing, so it's either his 12th or 13th year, and zero warm-up or anything, and I think like 495 on the bar, barefoot, you know, hits it like for 3, and didn't do anything before that. But he hit that because that's what was required, and that's all he was going to do. So, like, this is what you had to do today. Not saying, however you have to get there is up to you, but this is what you have to get. And walked in, did that, and was out. And it was just like, oh my God. Like, that's one of the guys you're like, he'd be really good if he didn't have to work out.
Yeah.
He'd still be probably pretty damn good. You know, so there's some freaks and some outliers for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of what we were talking about earlier. The outliers are the outliers.
Yes. He slapped me. I remember one time I made a tackle. I got up, and he slapped my head with his hand, you know, just his glove. And it was like the hardest hit I had all year was just from that. And I'm like, damn, I'm so glad you are on my side of the ball and on my team. Yeah, there's some animals out there for sure.
With the athletes that you have coming in now, granted, you said most of it's with your kids, right? What are some of the biggest pitfalls that you see with them coming in?
I think a lot of them, it's the entitlement, and I think a lot of it has to do with social media today. I think a lot of the kids have been told from 9, 10 years old through Facebook or an Instagram account how good they are, or how many stars they are, and where they're going to be projected to be one day. You know, growing up, there was none of that. You know, there was no constant praise. So you try to do it through your play. You know, a lot of these kids, especially with a lot of the kids are getting the praise in 7-on-7 football. So that's not even real football, right? So a lot of these kids are, you know, making these highlight tapes and getting this national attention for a sport that's not really even their true sport. And then they wonder why they're not as good when the pads come on, because, you know, the physicality isn't quite there like it was, you know. So I just think a lot of the entitlement and attention is going to be the downfall of a lot of kids. And I think the further that some of them can stay away from it, the better off they'll be. And it's just tough. It's a different era. It's a different generation where the spotlight is on them from a very young age, and you have people all over the world telling them how good they are. And some of them hear it from such a young age that I think it becomes, you know, expected, and they feel like they don't need to work as hard anymore, because they've always been that good.
Yeah.
And it's just a rude awakening I've seen a lot of it, rude awakening for guys that eventually, you know, don't make it pro.
Well, I forget what the numbers are, but I remember it was in my high school weight room or whatever. It showed like the number of people who make it to the NFL to the number of people that start. It's like millions that play. You know, JV football, and like one. You know, makes it. And it's if they think that pyramid's reversed, they're setting themselves up for a very sad awakening. It's
disappointing to a lot of them, and even for them to make it, so many things have to go right along the way, right? They have to go to the right high school, the right college. They have to stay healthy the entire time. They have to have the right opportunity, you know, and then on top of it, still have to play well. So it is much, much harder to make. And I think what kind of dulls that picture for them is they see me in there, and they see other pro athletes come in there, and they see all these guys, you know, so they're like, oh, you know, that's, you know, eight professional athletes that came in today, you know, I'll be one of those guys. Well, those 8 guys are, 8 guys that are coming there because, we all know each other.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah.
there's millions of them that didn't make it, and that's why they're not in there.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a rude awakening for a lot of them, unfortunately, because they've been told from a young age, this is what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even know if they really want to do it or not, but or a lot of them already peaked because, they grew at 8, 9, 10 years old, 11, 12. And then 13, it's like 14, you were the same age when you were 11.
Yeah.
Right. But you were the man back then because you were that much bigger,
Yeah.
stronger, faster than everybody.
Yeah.
So,
Now, that's kind of fucked up if you think about it, because with the guys that make it to the pro and the guys that go through college, we always bitch because nobody's preparing you for post-career. Right? They should, but it hasn't happened in 50 years. It's probably not going to happen.
No.
These kids need to be prepared for post-career at 12.
I know. Yeah. It's unfair.
It's fucked up because it's hard enough for you guys,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, yeah, it is. No matter when you are done playing, it's never easy, and no one's ever ready for it. And I remember just, the constant seminars and people coming in and talking about, post-career ideas and all that. And I knew I couldn't play forever, but I still didn't want to hear it because it was like, I don't want to hear that shit. I'll figure it out when I get there, which is not the smartest approach at all to take.
Yeah.
Right. But it was just, this is what I'm doing. I don't want to think about anything else until I have to. So, in a sense, it might be better when they're younger because it's not ingrained in them as long, right? Because when you're playing football for 20 years and then all of a sudden that first fall comes and there's nothing. And not only is there not nothing, but there's literally nothing in your day for you to do besides carpool and pick kids up. It's a massive adjustment of intensity, routine, and everything else involved. So I think the first year is never easy. I've talked to guys all the time that are preparing to stop playing or already played. I said, no matter what you have planned, if you truly loved the process and the sport, the first year will never be easy. Like it's weird. It's weird to be done and have a bunch of free time and, not have the locker room camaraderie. I think that's the biggest thing that's missed is, being able to go in and talk to guys in a locker room and kind of bullshit, hang out and talk about your sport or whatever, right? And then next thing you know, you're kind of either with your wife and your kids or, she goes out and does something, the kids go to school, you're at your house all by yourself. It's like, who do I talk to, right? So it's definitely a major adjustment. I just think the sooner you can kind of get into something and find your next passion, the better off you are.
What's your identity?
Yeah.
Right. So it's a catch-22 because if it's not your identity while you're still playing, are you going to suck?
Yeah. And that's the thing too. Like I remember my sister would always tell me, it pissed me off. She was like, you just need to redefine yourself. You need to do, I'm like, why? Like what other career when they're done playing do people say, oh, you got to be somebody else now? It's like why? I get it. Right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to walk around with shoulder pads and helmet on everywhere I go. But, at the same time, like it's part of me, so it's an interesting transition for sure. Something that you kind of never get away from though. Like it's always part of you. There's no doubt about that.
It's been 3 years?
4.
4?
Yeah.
So are you on the other, obviously it's better now than it was the first year.
Yes.
So what are some of the things that helped you the most?
I took 1 year off and then I went back to coaching with the team. So when I was back coaching with the Texans, it was kind of like all in, no time to think about anything else. So that helped a lot, honestly. But then I stepped away again and I'm doing my own gym and I'm a lot more involved with my own kids. So I just think the busier I am, the better off I am. And the more structured my day is and routine driven and planned out, laid out, I do way better. Not saying that's for everybody. Some guys like to retire and play golf all day, and that's cool. But that doesn't get me going, right? So I think finding a second passion or something similar, guys would be a lot better off.
Were there any things that you wanted to talk about that I didn't bring up, topic-wise?
I don't think so. Do you have any ideas?
No, I'm asking. That's why I threw it out to you, because I wanted to walk through your whole training path, right? And I'm not going to ask the question like if you could go back and do it all over again, because I don't like that question, because the context isn't there. I already asked, what you would do with your own kids.
Yeah.
And that's a weird rabbit hole there too, right?
Yeah.
Because you're trying to make them hard but not make them hard.
Correct.
Where I don't know what to even do, with having been through that, myself. It's like you don't know.
Sure.
So I tend to think that you want to err on the side of being too hard, but,
I can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. I think, obviously you want to be, as a parent and a teacher and a coach, you want to be, stern and set a level of expectations, but at the same time, never drive a kid too far. And it's a very fragile, line. And
well, what do you mean by too far?
Like, you don't want to drive a kid that he ends up hating a sport, or ends up hating you.
Yeah.
That's my biggest fear. Is, being so on top of my own children that eventually one day they want nothing to do with me, because it was such a turnoff to them, that, they quit a sport and completely changed who they were or whatever they did because, I ruined it for them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm always constantly trying to find that balance between father and coach, and like a good father. And a good coach, but more importantly, a good father.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've, said some wrong things. I've done some wrong things. I'm nowhere near perfect, right? I've made my mistakes in parenting and my relationship with my wife, but at the same time, I think if the intent is genuine and good and not about you and it's about them, I think you'll be better off. And I'm still learning.
Yeah.
Right? I think I'll always be learning as far as a teacher and parent. It's the hardest job I've ever had. There's no doubt about that. Because, you can do everything right too, and they go out and still, have a shitty game.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody, that practices more than my older son or does more. But it doesn't mean he's going to, go 5 for 5 every time he goes up to the plate or catch 3 touchdowns every game. Like, everyone's still going to have bad off days. And I got to remind myself of that too. And learn how to be okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And just as loving on the off days as, the, great days.
Yeah.
It's tough.
How did they deal with your retirement, right? Because you go from even your off season, you were still training or doing recovery work a lot of times. And now it's like, the dude is never away. You're like always there. He won't shut up. Like,
I know.
So how did that pan out?
Yeah. So it was interesting because I retired and then, I went back to coaching.
Yeah.
So I was kind of gone a lot again. And then, I fully just stopped working and was home all the time. So, at first, like, everything, it's cool. It's a honeymoon period. It's fun. And then eventually it's like, we're just together too much, right? And my wife tells me all the time, like, you go do something, please, right? So, no, it was a fun and interesting transition for them too. I remember, when I originally stopped playing, I think it was my older boy. It was like one of his first questions was, "So we don't get Under Armour anymore? Like we don't get the Under Armour stuff anymore for." And I'm like, "Oh, you can. We just got to pay for it now. That deal's done." I had a car deal. I had a Corvette once, and that was gone. They were pissed about that. So it was like, your typical, I think my oldest was like 7 at the time. My younger were 6. And my older one was 4 or 5. So it was, your typical response from kids that age. But they miss going to the games. I always wanted to at least play and for them to be able to come to the game. So, I'm really happy I was able to accomplish that because that was, I think, a really cool experience and something I would have loved as a kid. But yeah, we're together a lot.
Yeah.
We're together a lot, and it's good for the most part. It's not so good at sometimes, but I think that's another balance I try to find as well.
Yeah.
Right. And still have something for myself that's separate, that I can kind of unwind and something kind of therapeutic to help myself and more mentally than anything else.
Yeah. The one thing that's cool for your generation coming through is, there's pros and cons of social media and all this other kind of stuff, but your highlight clips, even your games, are going to always be accessible for your kids to watch at any time.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
So, God forbid you're not here one day, they have all that.
Yeah.
They have your whole body of work that they can have at their fingertips, on their phone, or who knows what it will be 10 years from now.
Yeah, that's really true. And obviously, they're in the whole iPad phase where, they have Wi-Fi if it's at the home. So, they look up that stuff and, ask me why I headbutted it.
I was just going to ask.
Yeah. So I get those kind of questions, right? It was, Dad, what were you thinking? When you took your helmet off and headbutted the guy from the Browns. And it's like, I really want to tell you what I'm thinking, but I don't know if you could. I don't know if you're there yet to understand it. But just tell him, I was pretty angry in the moment and wasn't thinking straight. Don't do that ever on the football field. So if there's anything from it, just learn to keep your helmet on. But I think they think it's kind of funny, when they see, the mic'd up videos or the level of intensity, they're like, you're crazy, but at the same time, it's funny because my kids have zero fear of me. Like they are like, they know when I'm upset and they respond well, and just even jokingly, some of the stuff they say to me, I'm like, dude, do you realize grown men wouldn't say that to me and you're comfortable saying that to me? Like, that's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're boys, man. They're like boys. Like, they are all in, and it's fun raising them, and it's fun. It's cool also showing them that stuff.
Yeah.
They love watching the highlight videos. They watch other people's highlight videos. They compare them.
Well, you got to take it a couple stages further to where some kid in school's coming up to them and saying, is this your dad?
Yeah,
like,
right.
Your dad actually headbutted somebody without a helmet on? And how come all the photos of him got blood running down his face?
Exactly. Yeah. So my older son just started going to a school last year. It's 3rd through 8th grade. So you can imagine the 7th and 8th grade older kids are the ones kind of bringing that stuff up to him. And he's funny. He kind of like shrugs it off. I could tell he's proud, but he wants to be his own kid.
Yeah.
Where my middle boy's like, first person he'll introduce is he's my son. Or I'm sorry, he's my dad. It's like, dude, stop. Just be you. It's cool. So they're, like I mentioned earlier, very different personalities, but both are definitely watching the highlights.
Yeah. Well, it's like I said, it's cool that they're there, right?
Yeah.
Because those that played before you, yes, you can find film.
Yeah, it's tough
but
to
you got to
find,
kind of know people to find the film.
Yes.
And
it's very true.
It's a different thing. Even like this podcast or any podcast that you've been on or interview that you've done, they'll see.
Yeah.
They don't give a shit now.
Right.
But later on.
Yeah. Always accessible.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be cool if we all had that from our parents?
Right.
To be able to go back and see what they were thinking at what stage of their life.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome because we could throw it back at them.
Yes,
too.
exactly.
Like, remember you said this shit? You were, you're saying the same shit I'm saying right now, but now I'm bad because you're saying,
right.
You were worse.
I know.
Leverage.
Yeah, I would love to have my bad stuff for sure. Would love to hear it. So, yeah.
All right. Well, if there's no other topics that you had that you wanted to bring up, I can shut this down. Thank you guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
I
thank you for having me
appreciate
on.
you coming out. It's an honor to sit down and talk to you.
Same here.
Especially with everything that you've done and everything that you've done through training in the strength and conditioning without even you really knowing it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because it just becomes part of the dialogue.
Absolutely.
This is the guy that busted his ass. I spend more time trying to divert that conversation from, yes, he busted his ass, but remember he also did, the speed work, the skill work.
Yeah.
Because as we talked about, it gets kind of condensed in there.
It does, yeah.
And other than that, guys, thank you, and we're done. Today's episode is brought to you by First Detachment. Are you looking for a supplement brand that truly understands hardworking athletes? Look no further than First Detachment. 1D's real world experience is what I would consider, and they consider, battle tested. I have known Justin Harris for pretty close to 2 decades. And if there's anybody that I trust with nutritional and supplement needs, it's Justin Harris. If you guys have followed me and have followed the podcast, you pretty much already know how I feel about the supplement industry. For me to get behind any brand, I have to trust the brand and I have to trust the person both. And I'm pretty sure you guys all know why. When it comes to creating formulas and putting products on the market, and there's nobody that I trust more than Justin Harris. While I love all of their products, I'd suggest that you check out the Field Rations and WTH first. Go to www.firstdetachment.com and use the code TableTalk10 to save 10% off each order. The link is in the description. Today's episode is brought to you by Power Rack Strength CBD. Power Rack Strength was founded by Brian Carroll, a good friend of mine. I've been thrown many products over the years, literally thrown many products over the years, which was all junk. So of course I was going to bust Brian a little bit when he first came out with this, until he explained to me how much research and who his partners were that were associated with this company. Then after he sent me some of the samples to test, I was absolutely blown away by the drops. As with most people, I have a hard time falling asleep. I'm cool when I'm asleep, but I have a hard time falling asleep. These were the only thing that actually helped me out of all the different things that I've tried in the past. It definitely makes a difference in my training. So check out PowerRackStrengthCBD.com. Use the code TableTalk2023 and you'll receive 35% off your first order. If I'm pushing anything, I'm pushing the drops first, then I will push the roller second. The balm is good, but I'm just not a balm guy. America Health is a premium telehealth platform specializing in hormone optimization and preventative medicine. Are you looking to optimize your health in and out of the gym, improve recovery, sex drive, and quality of life? Have you tried speaking to your health professional about this and have gotten the cold shoulder, stereotyped, or just told as part of getting older? You just go to americahealth.com/table talk and you can create your own lab, or you can take labs that we've had set up for them, which are based upon the same labs that I've been doing over the last 15 years. Or you can use their guided optimization. With this, they'll put you in touch with a patient care coordinator, which is actually pretty cool because you get to sit down and speak to somebody that can understand what you're looking for from hormone optimization and the preventative medicine standpoint. After that conversation, they'll determine which labs that you should and which tests you should have done, and then from there, get the labs done. They'll review those labs with you and put you in touch with one of their hormone optimization specialists that can determine which supplementation that you should use, over the counter or prescription. AmericaHealth.com/table talk. The discount code is table talk. Today's episode is brought to you by Element, a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything that you need and nothing that you don't. In other words, no sugar, no artificial coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, and no BS. With Element, I love the watermelon. The watermelon tastes freaking awesome. I drink 1 pack every day, no matter what. People that train out here, it's sitting out here for them all the time. The boxes don't last very long. Right now, Element is offering Table Talk listeners a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 single serving packages free with any Element order. Get yours at drinkelement.com/table talk. The deal is only available through the link in the description. The other thing is, if you don't like it, you can just give it away to a salty friend and Element will give you a 100% refund. No risk, money back guarantee. Head over to drinkelement.com